Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Bets and Banter, and I want to say right off the rip, I know that my audio quality could use a little bit of improving, guys, and I will be doing that very soon. I want to address it right off the rip because we have people all the time in the chat asking, yo, what's going on with the audio? So I just want to let you know it's going to be fixed very soon. We have a small problem with the microphone. It's still enough that you can hear me. Turn up that volume and we're going to get rocking. So, guys, it's Bets and Banter. And what are we talking about today? It's UFC Vegas 99. I have to say, one of my favorite main events of the year. If you've been watching me for a long time, I got the Renzo Gracie sweatshirt on. I like to get down like Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. I'm looking for the front headlock. I'm looking to take the back off that. I'm looking to make you tired and break you down over time. I've learned from some of these guys in the UFC. I try and implement that in my own style, in my own game. So I'm a big Fluffy fan, but he's got his hands full with the big man, Michel Pereira, a very dangerous striker, a very, proven guy in the UFC, a 9-2 record that gets slept on, I think, because of the antics and because of some of the other surrounding, theatrics. But with that being said, guys, you know that we can't go it alone on Bets and Banter, and I'm very excited because we have a brand new guest, a brand new friend of the show, and somebody that I've been listening to as well do his own breakdowns in the past. That's how I know that he's legit as it gets. So my man, Key 3 Picks in the building. How are you, my man? Cheers to
What's
you.
good, bro? Cheers. I'm excited to get going on this card. A lot of low level women's MMA. That's my bag, so I'm excited to go.
Absolutely love it. And if you guys have been here in the past, our guy Dravi does a show with Key 3 Picks. I will put a link to that down in the description below. But all the information for our guy Key, including his Twitter, is down in the information below. He puts out a lot of free information on there that's very quality. So just as a heads up, guys, you can go ahead and follow him there. And it's a great way to interact with him. So with that being said, thank you very much to our guest. Thank you to the sharpest chat in the game for assembling once again. We've got a lot of very sharp people that have been rocking with us. Dixon, the first to be in the comment section, and we got a lot of other people, Cole as well, Jermaine in the chat already. I appreciate everybody being here. Thank you guys so much. Without further ado, though, we got plenty of fights to talk about, so let's get into the first one of the night. And speaking of the big boy, we've got a big boy in the main event. We've got a bigger boy on the first fight of the night. It's Robelis Despaigne. And last time out, my man, I don't know what you thought about that fight, but I saw a guy in Waldo Cortez Acosta who went very back and forth with Thomas Peterson in some of those wrestling exchanges, and I was like, yeah, this is probably not going to work out for Robelis. What did you think about that one?
Yeah, that was a funny one. I did not honestly the seeing all the clips of Waldo getting dead, my guy. Seeing all the clips of Waldo getting deaded at one of the top ranked boxing events was like flying around on Twitter all week long. And so in my head, like I didn't even think like to even take a shot on Waldo. So shout out to everybody who took shots on Waldo and was looking at that fight because that was an funny ass performance to say the least.
Dude, I will say that was one of my favorite bets of the year. And it's because of the premise, right? I actually picked Waldo by sub. It didn't end up going that way, but I was just like, where is the evidence that this guy could fight 10 minutes? That was like my whole premise. I was just like, I've watched his Taekwondo matches, which I think most people cannot say. I've gone back and watched his Taekwondo matches, and when you look, the guy was getting tired in like 7 minute Taekwondo matches against these dudes that just didn't look like UFC quality strikers. Now, was it, a crazy athlete? Is it crazy that this guy can kick people in the head? 100%. Like, this guy is a freak of nature, but he's 36 years of age. And you always have to be like, all right, what is the realistic learning curve for some of these guys? And that was the whole premise for me of the bet. I was just like, Waldo, I've seen him on the regional scene go out there against tough guys and be in some tough situations, work his way back up, find a way to win. I was like, in this fight, I have to trust him to go out there. And I even thought that there was a good chance he was going to get knocked out, but I was like, at plus 200, I'm living with that result. In that case, he ended up going out there and he mostly just laid on him. But late in the fight, he did actually get some offense going. He was like postured up and looking for a TKO late. I thought we saw a little bit of heart from Robelis, right? Did we see anything technical? No. Did we see something that was at least like a lot of these guys? I'm telling you, if it's a heavyweight, they get put on their back for about zero point 0.8 seconds flat. They're like, yeah, thanks anyways. See you. Give me the door, please. Whatever. Wrap an arm and a head and something else, and I get out of here. And he didn't do that. So I thought that was a little bit of a good look for him. And it shows at least he wants to be here, right? He wants to have that heart. I think he's going to have a point to prove coming back in this matchup. However, a guy in Austen Lane on the other side, he kind of showed off at least the right game plan, the right idea against Denise, right? He went out there, he went for some takedowns, he tried to press the action there, and then Denise is back up on his feet, and it's all wraps for him. And he did look tired. He looked fatigued in the second round. And for me, I thought Waldo has 15 minutes to go, right? For sure. I was pretty bankable on that as a premise. And it's like, I don't think that this guy's got 15 minutes to go. Honestly, he takes a punch worse than most guys on the heavyweight roster. And that's sad to say. It's just the truth. I'm talking about Austen Lane here. Robelis Despaigne definitely has some flaws, right? I'm not advocating betting him at minus 265, but last time I liked Waldo because he actually has like positive attributes, and I think this would be the kind of fight where you're kind of fading shit with shit, which we've talked about before on the show, and I've talked about Austen Lane having upside before. I think I bet the sub at like 11-1 against Tafa. Guys, I've tweeted before, and I truly stand by this. The Tafa brothers, God bless their hearts, some of the worst to ever do it. Terrible. Not good on the ground. And I'm saying, when you look back at those fights, it was like, Austen Lane, he can't get those ones done. It's like, all right, I'm out of the Austen Lane business. And he could win this fight, but for me, I would keep my hands clean of it because I don't trust his chin at all. And I do think that Robelis Despaigne has a chance to go out here and win it. But if you talk about the more experienced MMA guy, it is Austen Lane. Both guys are around the same age. I just don't think he can take a punch. And for me, durability is like the number one attribute I like somebody to have if I want to trust them with my money. And at plus 200, you go a little bit further out on the risk curve, as my guy Yanni the Greek likes to say. But I'm just not feeling it with Austen Lane. I don't know that he's UFC level long term, and I think the opposite is true for Robelis. I think he could win fights at the lower echelon at heavyweight. I don't think there's a top 5 or a top 10 in his future because anybody that knows the wrestle, knows the jiu-jitsu is going to put him through the paces. How do you feel, my man?
Yeah, I think that this is what's up, my guy? My guy Nick. Yeah, I agree with a lot of your analysis. I was literally before you even mentioned the Tafa brothers, I was literally about to bring up Junior Tafa off of his back last week. And if Sharaf had probably like 30 more seconds, Tafa was out of there and ready to go home. And that was insane. On the Lane side, though, I love guys who are coming from different sports and have athletic backgrounds, and we know that he has an NFL background. But like you mentioned, he just can't take a punch the way that these heavyweights dish him out. His chin is just not there. I believe he's been knocked out in all 5 of his losses. Denise was the first one to take him to round 2. I think that Robelis probably gets it done in round 1. I believe Robelis is at ATT in Florida. He is on the good with the good doctors over there too, most likely. So I would expect for Robelis to show us a little bit of a takedown defense and a little bit more grappling. I'm not as crazy as my guy Jewish Better who takes long shots on those sub props, but I don't have the balls like that. But I will say I think that he'll probably defend 1 to 2 takedowns, and then from there, I'm sure that he's going to find the nuke. Lane is just reckless in the pocket, and it was really, really weird how he gassed out so badly whenever he had an easy round on top in round 1. It wasn't like Denise was like forcing a shit ton of scrambles or anything. Like he had a really easy time on top in that first round. And then round 2 just looked like he couldn't hold his hands above his head. Like it was insane. So yeah, I think the Robelis gets it done. I'm not parlaying Robelis period at minus 340. But I do understand people who are doing it, just pick winners, I guess. But I'm all about value, and this line has no value on it, so it's a pass fight for me.
Yeah, man, we see this one largely the same way, which is, probably a deserved favorite here in Robelis Despaigne. But do you want to trust the guy who just spent 15 minutes laying on his back in his last fight? No, that's typically a tough look. There is as high as 30-1 on the Robelis sub. And I will say, man, I am the kind of person that has a cracked out brain for this. I've bet, wild sub props, and some of them have looked as wide or wider than the number that they gave me. But there's been other times, I think the widest one I ever hit is Derek Brunson, 29-1. To submit Darren Till. That was one of my favorite bets of all time because he was literally half knocked out on the feet, double leg to the mount, right to the rear naked choke. That was unbelievable. But when you look, like a guy like Robelis, he is an athletic freak and he's got some length to him, right? I think a guy like Austen Lane, what can we expect from him presumably in this fight? Probably bad takedown attempts from far away, right? Like that's what I would do if I was fighting this guy. I'd be like, please, I'm going to try and get a hold of him from anywhere. And what's the first kind of fundamentals you teach somebody? You want to teach him to dig underhooks, right? But what's the thing that MMA guys end up doing instead? They grab the gilly. And do I really trust that Austen Lane would defend that if he gets put in that by this big man? I think if Robelis grabbed him, he could probably pick him up off the ground and spin him around the octagon, honestly. So at 30-1, I've made stupider bets, but he's probably going to KO him. To your point, the other thing I will mention, though, I think there could be some interest in a later round prop. I think it's like plus 500 or so.
I like that
for the round 2 for Robelis, and I do think there's a non-zero chance that he just gets taken down and held down, and then Austen Lane gasses out like he did his last fight. And again, it's like, do I want to lay a minus 265 and find out, or do I want to just have a little upside on 0.2 units to win a unit on the round 2? That's something I would consider here as well, because I do think Robelis is a prime candidate to get taken down, but then still have enough to just kick this guy in the head one time and finish the fight in round 2, or hit him with like a loose jab and also just drop him. So you know what I mean? Like if I thought it would take special offense, then maybe it would be different. But I think a 5-5 guy put him down on the regionals. Greg Hardy made his name off this win. So yeah, a couple of non-bullish signs there in my opinion. We can move along to the next fight, my man, and this is your bag. We got Melissa Martinez taking on Elise Ardelean. Talk about low-level women's mixed martial arts. Ardelean is a star, right? You look at her social media numbers, she's doing numbers, but it ain't because of the fighting, ladies and gentlemen. Melissa Martinez on the other side, fighting family, but what do I make of, her last performance? I mean, I don't think very highly of Elise Reed. I'm curious what your opinions are in that regard. I think certainly she's a mark in the grappling. Good women that have real talent have taken advantage of her several times when they take it to the mat, whether that's with ground and pound or with submission opportunities. And women that don't typically get those submissions have pulled it off before on Elise Reed, like Aloma Lukbunmi and others. So I think that was not a great sign, but what do we always talk about? UFC debut, typical underperformance spot in terms of when we expect people to have an underperformance. So I think that you could chalk that up as, hey, a couple years later, she's had some time off. Maybe she shows a better product. What do you think of this one, my man?
I mean, I have to think, shout out to you, my guy. I have to think that honestly, she has to have had some improvements over this long time off. I'm not exactly sure, and I don't have all the information. I haven't seen anything that she's posted about exactly why or what surgery she potentially had. But on the regionals, like looking back at her tape, honestly, I was halfway impressed. Like she was dropping some of these girls, and Combate Global does have a really bad women's scene, if I'm being completely honest. I think that their women's scene is pretty garbage, but she was really showing herself and was really actually cutting some cool angles, was able to sit some people down, and had more pop than I remember. The Elise Reed, Elise Reed's a funny case for me because she will weirdly have flashes of like looking brilliant and she'll drop. And I mean, Melissa Martinez's fight was a perfect example. She drops Melissa Martinez and then instead of following up with anything, takes a step back, gives a little woo, and then points to the commentary booth. And like whenever she could have easily been pressing. So it is absolutely hilarious to watch Elise Reed fight. And I can't wait to get to that one next soon. But I think that Melissa Martinez is going to have the volume here. I have to assume Ardelean, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts about this, but Ardelean on top did not look like she really knew what she was doing. She was getting put in some armbar setups that were pretty basic, it seemed like to me, by Shauna Bannon that was really, really alarming. And so I don't think Ardelean has the physicality to get Martinez down potentially, but I think that Martinez is going to be able to use the cage to get back up. It's not like I think that Ardelean is going to actually have real top pressure and be able to submit her. So really you're looking at, does Ardelean physicality, cage pushing, and potentially moment winning win her the fight here? And I don't think that that's the case. I do think that Ardelean does hit hard and have tools, but she does not have any process on the feet. There's no real process. It's just sort of walk forward and try to find a bomb. And I think that Melissa Martinez does have process. She's going to throw a lot of kicks. She has a strong kickboxing background. We just watched her brother David on Contender Series have a great performance. So I have to assume that she's looking pretty good. And that she's probably going to figure out a way to get it done here. I'm not sure there's going to be a 30-27 because I think that Alice is pretty decent against anybody at this level in women's MMA. I think she's pretty decent in round one against anybody for the most part. And she is a pretty tough girl. And I know somebody just commented about the Weili fight. But even that fight, she showed off some real toughness. I mean, a lot of girls would have just gone ahead and took the easy way out. But she took there and took her beating. And so I think there's a spot where Melissa's cardio and I think their pace is probably going to wear on Elise late. Elise did make the switch to Fusion XL, which I don't necessarily love the camp, but she is taking it serious, probably spending a little less time on OnlyFans. So for that, I got to give her some credit. She made weight easier than she did on short notice in UFC 304. So this will be a fun fight. I'm interested to see if Alice can show off some new tricks to her game. But outside of big, wide hooks and just physicality, I don't think that she offers much at this level. Melissa may be a little smaller. And even though at weigh-ins, though, she did look pretty thick. Like, she looked pretty big.
And you know what's interesting? We're going to switch tab for just a second, and I'm going to let you continue. But if you look, the Tapology is way different than the UFC stats. They've got a 4-inch reach advantage compared to a 2-inch reach advantage on Tapology. So I think that that's a big difference and something that we want to keep in the back of our mind here. Please continue.
No, for sure. And Martinez is also somebody, that's a great point because Martinez is somebody that strikes pretty long also. She really gets out there on her straight shots, and she's not somebody that's super boxy and tight like Elise is. And Elise is going to throw big, wide hooks, and it's not – I think that the straight shots are going to win here. I wouldn't be surprised if – I'm not saying that she'll get her out of there by any means, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see Martinez in round 2, round 3 actually be the one that's having the moments, and she's definitely going to be the minute winner. I'm not able to eat the chalk at I believe minus 145 it is currently, just because the girl hasn't won a fight in 5 years or 4 to 5 years. We don't know what she's going to look like. We don't know what injuries that there potentially were. There's not a real explanation. So for me personally, I'm not looking to eat minus 145 on a bunch of unknowns versus a girl in Elise that I do know is probably going to come in here to fight, and she's going to be there a full 15 most likely. And so I think that the over was potentially a good parlay piece. But for me personally, I don't see a ton of ways to play this fight confidently.
Fair play, my man. I look at a fight like this, and first of all, I'll just disclose to my audience, right? The way I structure my research, I definitely prioritize the main card. I do my write-up. That's going to be published on Roto Grinders at some point tonight. It's already been submitted to my editor. Whereas the prelims, I write overnight. So I have to do a little bit more research on this fight, a little bit more tape study as I go. But what I could tell you is the line movement's been a little bit weird on this fight off the rip, right? Like it went from minus 175 all the way down to minus 145 on the Melissa Martinez side. And I think that when you look at Elise Ardelean, there's been a little bit of a tug of war, right? A little bit of money came back on the Martinez side. But I just struggle to have like a confident read on either one of these women, right? Like I look at Elise Ardelean. It's got 6 professional losses. I don't think she's a very good fighter. I don't think Shauna Bannon's a very good fighter. No disrespect. And I think that when you look at those performances, you look at the Melissa Martinez side, I think Elise Reed is a more justifiable loss, right? She's a little bit of a trickier style, even though I don't rate her very much as a fighter, and we'll talk about her a little bit more later, right? She could still go out of there and get the win by being a evasive footwork type of fighter, right? She comes in and out. She kind of just makes it a little bit awkward to get a hold of her. When you're on top of her, different story. But like when it's a fight where she can dictate the range, she has a lot more success. She can throw some kicks. She can keep you at distance. So I think that, you give Melissa Martinez a little bit of a pass there, but I think it's a wait and see type of fight, right? You just mentioned maybe don't bite off the chalk. It's like, yeah, I think she should win this fight, but do you want to get caught speeding if she gets taken down by Elise Ardelean? And then you're like, why did I lay chalk on a girl with way less professional experience? Because she's been out for a while. And I always talk about, I like activity. I think the fact she's a bigger southpaw, that's a good thing for me. But when I'm looking at the fact she hasn't been active for a little while, I talked about it with Corey McKenna before she came back. A lot of people were bullish on her, and I was like, she hasn't been very active, and for me, that's a red flag. And then she's had a couple performances since where she didn't look like herself. She's been out, and you don't know what's going on in these people's personal life, right? If they're in the cage, you can evaluate. You can say, hey, they look healthy, they look good, I like what I'm seeing. If they've been out for a while, you have to start to make more judgment calls and a little bit more guesses. And for me, that's not something I like to do at chalk. So I think that Melissa Martinez should be the side, but I want to just, keep my hands clean of this one unless something really jumps out at me on tape. But I appreciate the breakdown there, my man. And speaking of the devil, we got Elise Reed up next, and she's taking on Jessica Penne. And my man, I want you to talk me off betting Jessica Penne, KO at 20-1 and inside the distance, because I think of Elise Reed as, certainly the better striker in this matchup. I don't have any questions about that. But I think of Jessica Penne as kind of a savvy vet of the game that didn't have as many fights as she should have because she was sidelined by USADA and these things, right? Tried to change her biological profile. Hey, hats off to her, right? If you don't have the right biological profile to win the title, go out there and change it. Go out there and get a better biological profile. God bless. But when I look at how, things turned out, it was a little bit of an unfortunate run out for her. She's a pretty awkward fighter, right? To go out there and put Loopy in these weird situations, when you see the physicality difference, Loopy's literally power bombing her across the octagon, yet she's still going like nip tuck decision. It's like Jessica Penne just has that ability. She pops out on your back. She makes it awkward. And I think in terms of the level of skill on the ground, it's not close. I think Jessica Penne is certainly better on the mat. So her wrestling's not great, but she trains all the time with Angela Hill, J-Flow Judo, and these guys. It's like, what are they trying to do with this woman? Like, teach her how to get somebody to the ground so she has a chance to win the fights. And for me, I think that this is the exact kind of fight she has a chance to win. You got a 7-4 girl in Elise Reed who has real experience, right? Fought solid girls, but the weakness is there, right? It's not like people haven't exploited it. And girls that I mentioned before, they're ace in the hole as they're grappling. Every time out, they're going to grapple you to death. It's like the Muay Thai striker, the first Thai in the UFC, it just goes out there and absolutely works on the mat. So I know she works with the Hickman brothers, and I really respect Loma. I said that I thought Loma could finish that fight. But when you look, it's like the way that she did it, I was like, wow. It's like she should be at the Mundial. She should be at the Jiu-Jitsu World Championship with that. And I think that Jessica Penne has the same opportunity here at 41. Do I want to go heads over tails for a money line bet at plus 150 when the alternative is she's just chasing this girl around and it looks like the Ducote fight where she's just getting beat up, it kind of looks like a punching bag. I don't know that the money line necessarily is big value, but I think the ITD is tricky, like interesting, because if she gets top position, like the other thing is Sijara Eubanks, is she some, prolific world beater? I know she's aggressive. I know she's damaging. She's a strong woman, definitely stronger than Penne. But can Penne not sit in the mount and throw, 40 uncontested strikes and the fight gets stopped? Like, that's the one thing I always talk about in WMMA especially. Nobody ever looks for the KO, I feel. And I understand why, right? More often than not, you'd be crying in your coffee. But I have had opportunities like Amarim KO 16-1, right, against Conejo. And then you look at the next time out, Mora is plus 320 to win by KO against Conejo. It's like the market has now seen that the path is there. It's like they need to see it played out in front of them. And I think people are forgetting that Sijara Eubanks got on top of this woman and just sat on her chest and punched her in the face until it was scary. So it's like, I don't think, she's very competent on the ground. I think she makes a lot of mistakes, and that could lead to you getting finished multiple different ways, right? I always say if you're in a dominant enough position to submit somebody, you could TKO them. Wrap a wrist, punch them, and the referee is eventually going to have to intervene, right? It's like, that's the way I always view it. So for me, if I think somebody could dominate on the ground, I look towards the ITD, and I look towards whatever prop is wider, right? If they think it's a KO, then I look towards the sub. If they think it's a sub, I look towards the KO. And in this case, man, I'm like 20-1 on the girl who I think if she just gets top position, like she could probably just sit up in the mount and beat her up. I don't know. I might make that small donation, brother. What do you think?
Yeah, sadly, I'm not here to talk you off of this spot, I don't think. Elise Reed is one of the only ones that I would say 42-year-old woman could potentially look like the 42-year-old man that won a title in Glover Teixeira. But I think that Jessica Penne is not – I don't think that she's completely outmatched here. Elise Reed on the feet, Elise Reed is definitely going to have her looking. But one thing about Elise Reed is she's not going to throw a ton of volume also. That's the difference between Ducote and even Tabitha Ricci threw a lot of leg kicks. And they were just out volume and just so much faster to a punch. Elise is going to, like I mentioned earlier, might hurt you, but she's going to look around at the crowd, take a look who's out there, talk to the commentary booth a little bit. In her corner, she's not going to be focused at all. She's going to be bickering back and forth with her corner. I mean, you just don't know what you're going to get. And I'd like to mention that in the Ricci fight for Penne, she forced a lot of weird grappling situations that I'm very, very confident Elise Reed would not have handled the same way that Ricci did. Ricci looked a lot better. And that was one of Ricci's coming out performances on UFC 285, which was a big card on John Jones' return. But Penne forced a lot of awkward transitions. She forced grappling, even though realistically that Ricci probably could have outpointed her for 15 minutes and went to the Cody route. But Penne forced it to a point where she got finished by armbar. But I'm not holding that against her off of what we know that Ricci to be now, especially. But Elise Reed, I mean, Liam was talking earlier. I mean, borderline white belt type stuff. Like, it's just absolutely like, what are you thinking? What's going on here? Is there any process on the ground? Like, did we practice any get ups? Did we practice fighting the hands? Anything? Like, and so she's getting on the ground and looking like Robelis Despaigne, and we're sitting here just like, okay, well, what do we do now? And so that's very problematic for me at minus, I believe, 180 currently on Bet Online. At minus 180, I'm not backing a white belt, regardless of what I think that their striking advantages may be, because it takes one takedown for them to instantly turn into the underdog by a wide margin at that, too. Penne is going to force grappling exchanges. She potentially will find the back. And I think if she gets the back, that's the round or that's the fight. And whenever we're dealing with variables like that, I will pass on the favorite side of this. So then it becomes about, am I betting Penne? And the answer is no for me personally, because it's looked absolutely awful, like absolutely awful. I know that Angie Hill has been in that camp, and Jenna Bishop's over there. They have Ducote over there now after Ducote fought Penne. And it's still, she did not age like Angie Hill. Let's just say that. Because Penne is super slow. I mean, just super slow. It's like, it's painful almost how slow she is. And I love it because she understands that. And so that's the reason why she will force a lot of these awkward grappling exchanges. And I wouldn't be surprised to see her just flat out pull guard here. And I think, and this is one of the rare times where I will say pulling guard may be the path to victory here, like realistically, because Elise Reed just doesn't know what's going on the ground, it seems. So I think at minus 180, you're having to hope for Elise Reed to magically, after all these years of having a grappling hole, finally shore it up. And then you're asking Penne to not get into really any grappling situations at all. And I think that's tough to avoid. So for me personally, as a pass, I can understand a lot of the ITD look. And honestly, pretty sneaky. I gotta give you credit there. So I actually like that look a lot.
I appreciate that, my man. And here's the best part, right? I always like to think that, I'm willing to change my mind over time, right? And if you look, this was my last write up on Tabitha Ricci against Jessica Penne. And it starts off by saying, my early lean in this fight was towards Penne, but the more I looked into it, I realized Ricci is going to be too good on the ground, and that's where she's good, right? So it's like, if you can't do your good thing, you're probably going to have a really tough time. So when you look at that fight, it ended up being a sub 2. I predicted a TKO 2. But when you look, the analysis was, listen, I think Penne is still a savvy vet. She still has these tools, but it's like, it's just not going to work in this one. It's all up shit's creek without a paddle in this one. Now she's got a matchup where I'm like, well, I'm back in. Now I'm like, my initial lean, I'm like, then I watch Elise Reed and I'm like, she's as bad as I remember. So I think that when I look at this fight, it's a dog or pass situation. I do respect people that are on the other side. I acknowledge that I sometimes am a little bit too forgiving of vets and these kind of things. But I think that when you look at this matchup on paper, certainly if it was 2 or 3 years ago, we're talking about a completely flipped line. And now we're looking at the fact that it's like, what has Elise Reed really done in terms of good, solid output, great wins? It's like most of the time, it's other people fumbling the bag. It's somebody else made a terrible mistake and they let Elise Reed win the fight. And you look at like the Corey McKenna win. How did that age? It was Corey McKenna blew it, And I don't mean that to like kick dirt. It's like that's just how it was, right? It's like she didn't go on and have the best success after. So she has a lot of skills and abilities, but size, these things, maybe atom weight. when atomweight rolls around, the whole complexion of the UFC is going to change. But for now, I think certainly size plays a big factor. And again, in this kind of fight, Jessica Penne, long, awkward. I think that helps her in the grappling. And against Tabitha Ricci, you're not going to submit her, right? She's very short, stout, and knows what she's doing. And in this fight, it's like I feel the complete opposite. So, should be a fun one, my man. I'm excited to see how this one shakes out. And you have to think Jessica Penne fighting for her career, right? Like if she goes out there and loses this fight, it's curtain. So
I
I
think
think
so.
that there's going to be some motivation there.
And even if you look at some of the social media, the podcasts that her and Angie Hill have going on, which is funny at times, I think that she has to be
Two
transitioning
straws
out.
on
Yeah,
Fight
two
Pass.
straws.
Check it out.
Yeah.
I love it, man. All right, let's see what we got next. We got one more women's bout to round us out. I was wondering why everybody was nonstop in the chat on this Jocelyn Edwards and Tamires Vidal fight, and I got my answer. It's because it's up next. This one's going down in the women's catchweight division, right? Because our girl Jocelyn Edwards and making weight don't go together. But if you look at this fight, it was supposed to go down at 135 pounds. Tamires Vidal did her job here on the scale. And I'll tell you, as I kick it to you, the only things I would look at are props on the Edwards side. I mean, the idea of ever laying a minus 260 with Jocelyn Edwards is not something that I would personally do. I don't think highly of Tamires Vidal. I do think that she's a quitter based on what we've seen in the tape. However, I don't like the idea of laying a big chalk price in WMMA with somebody that's missing weight routinely, going to close competitive decisions that they're getting jobbed out in, not looking great in the grappling against very average grapplers. I think there's a lot of red flags, but I'm curious what your thoughts are, my man. You have a closer eye for the WMMA scene, and again, my focus has mostly been on the main card in terms of my analysis so far, so I'm curious what you think here.
Yeah, this is I told this story on the BTL broadcast, and this is Jocelyn Edwards will forever hold a special place in my heart. She was part of like one of my first early on bets in 2022 on the Amanda Nunes 277 card. I was on Prize Picks, and it was one of my earliest bets. I got down like I was super new to MMA gambling. I put down $500 on Edwards and Nunes over fantasy scores on Prize Picks. And it cashed. That was like the first little bit of buzz I had gotten on Twitter, blah, 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 all this stuff. So the women's MMA, my ties run deep over here with women's MMA. But I say all that to say that neither girls are good here at all. I will say that Vidal should not, I don't know how she got here, to be completely honest. Like, she is pound for pound. If you're losing and having serious fights with Montserrat Rendon, I really don't know what to tell you. Like, I'll be completely honest. I know that she's the star after being Juliana Pena's main training partner this past camp, but Montserrat Rendon is pound for pound one of the worst fighters to ever grace the UFC octagon. And Vidal is getting taken down by her. She is the takedown attempts that she had in that first round were actually somewhat decent, but she is so mentally just like out of there. She spends more time on her dance on the way to the octagon than actually time in the octagon, it feels like now. And so Vidal, once she gets taken down, she'll sometimes look for a heel hook or two. She's open to pulling Gilly, but there's really not much threat there. On the feet, there's no process other than just throw some big haymakers and then a potential leg kick every now and then. I mean, if we get back to Ramona Pascual and the Vidal fight, I would bet Pascual every day of the week because that was just absolute like mean finish. Like, that's the one-time outcome there. Edwards here does have a process, and I can say Edwards, and this isn't me being biased just because she's my girl from back in the day, but Edwards has gotten better in the grappling. At one time, her takedown defense was just, I mean, you just blow on her and she falls over. But now she's trying to get up. She had a couple of cool sweeps over Aileen Perez. And it's not like I'm saying that Aileen Perez is Habib, but it's showing more and more growth. I think that she's going to win. I think that, does it feel nasty, super nasty to play that chalk? Hell yes. But I am very confident that she's going to win. I don't think that Vidal has any process or any tools to get this done here outside of just some big shot early. And Edwards has shown to have, one, some decent durability. And then two, I think that she's going to be able to fight at a pace that benefits her. Edwards isn't going to be dealing with nonstop chaos because Vidal, after one round, she has 1 round of physicality, 1 round of some strong cage pushing, some big haymakers, and a couple leg kicks. And then that's all she got. And so after that, round 2, round 3, I wouldn't be surprised to see Edwards put a beating on her. Honestly, I think, yeah, the weight miss is a concern, but she wasn't shaking Dylan Bugka style up on the scales. She wasn't, I mean, she was walking a little slow, but we've seen much worse. It seems like it was somewhat, no weight miss is comfortable, but it doesn't seem like it's just end of the world type of weight miss. So I think that she ends up looking fine here. I know she's been doing a lot of training still with Shevchenko. So I think that we're going to continue to see growth here. How she keeps this UFC job, I'm not too sure, to be honest. But I think that she's definitely going to keep it with this fight here. And Vidal, it has to be time to go. I mean, the boob shot KO last time out and then holding the ice pack on the boob while the decision's getting read. I mean, absolute scene. So I hope for a boob shot TKO, and hopefully we'll get some more memes out of this.
Yeah, my man, the thing that I sent on Patreon, I always do like a first draft idea board, and then I start to refine it. I try and make it like clean by the time that the fights roll around. And it's trying to identify like any lines that I think could have value, any lines that I think on either side, right? Because there's times when you look at a fight and you're like, hey, Jessica Penne, I think she could finish, but do I really want to invest in a plus 150 decision when her money line's plus 150? It's like, no, then there's no value. But you just go through and each fight, that's how I try and map it out. And when I looked at this fight, I was just like, the finishing props seemed wide to me because I feel like both girls have just, like you mentioned, Jocelyn Edwards, good durability overall, but has had a couple weird moments where either she ends up in bad positions or she looks like she's hurt and then she rallies back. Tamires Vidal, I just like terrible visuals. Like looks like she's ready to get out of there at all times at some points, and it's like I don't think she's a very comfortable fighter. But then you see Jocelyn Edwards like on death's door, like still push her at the face-off. So I was like, we got violence here. Something's got to give. Like, and I just look like the ends KO over 4-1 in this spot when you can't get either girl at better than like plus 850 to win the fight by knockout. And already that's a little bit low for WMMA. So I just start doing the chin stroke and I'm like, that's interesting. Then meanwhile, the ends by sub, which typically is the shorter line, right? If you look, just more women's fights end via submission than end via knockout, just generally speaking. And then that's all the way out at plus 850 and even potentially higher. I only looked at a couple books, but I was just like, that seems like, again, pretty wide for two women that I don't trust their grappling at all, especially if they're hurt. So for me, those are a couple of the notes that I had. It's just like a lot of big numbers on violence here when I don't really think that these women are like ironclad, like, they're not prone to making any mistakes. Like, I'm like, both these women could just slip on a banana peel, I feel. But in any case, like, who do I trust more? Jocelyn Edwards. And if she hadn't had the whole fiasco at the weigh-ins, I'd have probably not felt as skittish. But I just look and I'm like, a number of weigh-in fiascos, I don't like to see that. I don't like to see those start to compound, right? Because then either the UFC is going to bounce you to a different weight class, which doesn't exist at 135, right? They've already told everybody, like, it's 135 or get the hell out of here. And so for a lot of these women, that's a hard cut, but there's no alternative. And I think that that's kind of the case for Jocelyn Edwards. But if she can't make the class and, she continues to have those problems, they're going to give her harder matchups or bouncer. So she's got to find a way here. But in any case, my man, I appreciate the breakdown, and we'll see how that one ends up shaking out. She's got way more professional experience, both women on the right side of 30 there. Let's see who takes a step forward in the division. Next up, my man, my arch rival, my nemesis, Brad Katona. I can't get this guy's fights right. Not a huge fan if I'm just leveling with you. I'm hoping that John Matsumoto does not get sent to the Katonaverse. That would be an absolute tragedy as far as I chalk it up in MMA. But I think that this is a fun fight in the bantamweight division. I think John Matsumoto, he deserves a tougher challenge after going out there, getting a serious win. It's not easy to finish Dan Argueta. We just saw a very serious prospect in Cody Haddon go out there and have a great fight with him, but it was much more competitive, wasn't able to get the finish there. So I think a guy like John Matsumoto, you see that he's not a perfect minute winner, but he's a guy that just has these big moments of opportunity. He never stops working, I feel, and he put himself in a pretty dangerous cardio situation with Argueta where he was working really hard, but then he was able to get a very good squeeze after he looked like he was already starting to get tired, which is rare. So I think that he's kind of just got this ability to reset, almost like what we saw with Tyra the other day. I know that it looked like he was dead gassed in round 3, and then in round 4, he's back out there like he never was gassed in round 3. So it's just like there's these kind of guys that they can go through, a period where they're like looking fatigued and then get a quick recovery, whether it's by grabbing a body lock or whatever. They just need to get into their comfortable space. And I think that for Matsumoto, Brad Katona's a tough guy to fight for most people because he's going to throw a decent amount of volume. He's going to mix in the takedown attempts, but I don't think he's a very dangerous guy. Like, that's just not how I see Brad Katona. Jesse Butler, I thought had a chance against him because I was like, hey, he's a big guy. He's going to go out there. He's going to be more dangerous. He just got flat back the whole time. Brad Katona didn't even try to finish him, and I was just watching it in agony. And you look at Brad Katona's whole career, he always says, like, I'm going to come out and I'm going to be more aggressive in this one. I'm going to go for the finish in this one. They set him up for a big win in Canada against Garrett Armfield, and he blew it. And it's just like they've kind of done that a number of times. And I think he's only been a dog once before in the UFC against Merab Dvalishvili. If my memory serves, I'd have to go back and look at my research, but like the guy has not been an underdog frequently. He's typically expected to win fights. I think people are liking Matsumoto as like this guy being the future, but it's definitely a little price prohibitive for me. You have a guy in Brad Katona. He's been out there a million times in the UFC. I think that a decision only might make more sense than even the money line. I haven't looked at the price, but I don't think Brad Katona is very live to finish Matsumoto. I think Matsumoto's too tough for that. But I think that in this fight, like Brad's path is like greasy split decision, whatever the line is on that. That's probably a lot of his win equity, but I just wouldn't put it past him here. He's kind of been around for a long time, and I will say, if you look at his win streak outside the UFC, he put together a pretty solid, list of wins, and it wasn't like, they're world-class guys, but it was just like comprehensive performances, showed off a little grappling, showed off an ability to mix up the game when he needed to, and an ability to push through adversity. He's been rocked before, keep fighting. He's not a guy that you could easily put away either, so I think that those are a couple notes, but Matsumoto, for me, he is a dangerous finisher, right? Like, if you're putting away Dan Argueta, it's telling me a little bit something about your upside, and I think that he's got a chance to go out there and hurt Brad in this fight, and unlike a guy like Armfield, he's not one note, right? If Brad starts shooting bad takedowns when he's hurt, he might end up in that same guillotine, flat on his back as well. So I think Matsumoto, dangerous guy. I'm excited about his upside, but price is prohibitive for me. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of your breakdown. Katona is a guy that greasy split decisions. I think that's going to be a lot of his win equity here, as you mentioned. Matsumoto, I back versus Argueta. And shout out to Argueta even last week. I had Haddon against Argueta too. But Argueta is just, talk about toughness. Yeah, he fights. And you got to respect that. And I wish that and hope that they would keep him around just because. Matsumoto, the takedown defense looked spotty in the Argueta fight. I can't say, but Argueta wrestles everybody to some extent. Like he gets everybody down to some extent. He's just a horse. But Matsumoto pulling Gilly, that's something that me and my co-host Drive, we were talking before our podcast, and we were talking about the over in this fight, and I do like the over, and I think that it's fine. But the only finishing scenario that I see is that guillotine. Matsumoto is nasty with it. He's not afraid to go to it. And like you mentioned, if Katona shoots a sloppy or lazy takedown after getting hurt, that is something that can happen. Matsumoto, I do think I worry about his process on the feet long term, if I'm being completely honest. The Muay Thai background, I love it in the fact that he throws nice leg kicks. He's not afraid to fire in the pocket, but he does just get touched a little too much for my liking. And while in this fight, I don't think that's going to come to bite him in the ass, because Katona, outside the Gibson fight, we haven't just seen Katona just bite down on his mouthpiece and be ready to just go to war. And he's a tough guy. He's going to fight with a good game plan. He's a very smart guy. If you watched the latest tough season that he was on and some of the interviews, you can tell that the guy is super intellectual. He understands the fight game. He comes in with a good game plan. He coaches people out of SBG Ireland also. So you can tell that he's a guy that really does think the game through. And it shows in his success. He went out of the UFC and got the job job done a lot of times to come back and then win a tough season on top of that to now be back here fully. And so Matsumoto, though, I think that he is the goods, only 25 years old. I gotta say, I'm excited for his future. I think that he has a lot of the tools. I do just, again, I worry about some of the process. I worry about some of the game planning. And I think that that will bite him in the ass eventually. But Katona, like you mentioned, isn't a guy that's violent enough, in my opinion, to make him pay. And I honestly even rate some of Casey Tanner's striking more powerful and violent than Katona at times. I think Katona's just tap, tap, tap. And is there potential in this small octagon for Katona to get some cage push time and to potentially wrestle? Maybe. But I think that Matsumoto is going to get up, and it's on him to show the urgency, because I believe he's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. He's shown off his grappling a multitude of times. So it's on him to make that decision of, do I want to get up quickly or do I want to play off my back for a little bit, like a lot of us choose to do? So for those reasons, it's a pass on the money line. I do think that there's some cool props potentially. I think that the over is a very safe parlay piece potentially. But like I said, that Gilly is scary. That Gilly is scary, man. And we saw it last fight. But I mean, he's done it on regionals too. And he's a strong kid. He's a strong kid. And so I'm excited for this kid's future. The price is a little bit nasty here, but I'm excited to see how this fight goes.
Me too, man. And I did see a little bit of love come in on the submission for Matsumoto. So some other people in the market seeing what you're seeing, it's a little bit of an outlier price as well. So I think that this is an interesting fight. I don't think it's an easy one for Matsumoto, but I would not be surprised if, even if he's down a round, he ends up Gilly pulling another win here. It's a very powerful hold. There's a reason people like to go to it, right? You put people to sleep quick, and also you put people in a panic station really quick. You'll see more two-handed taps to the guillotine than any other move, in my humble opinion, because people just want you to let go. And I think that Brad, he doesn't have a big neck, right? It's not going to be easy, but I just think positioning is everything. And I think John Matsumoto showed off in that last fight. He can wrestle through positions, and as soon as he gets an opportunity, he commits 100%. So I don't mind some of those looks. I'm going to wait and see what the best available price is. But it's not an easy fight to call, and I think if it goes to the distance, the minus 220 is not going to look great. But I do think they're pricing in the fact that he's got more finishing upside than a guy like Katona, who's been a career decisionator. But should be a fun one regardless. Next up, my man, we're going to kick it to you first, my brother. We got Matheus Nicolau taking on Asu Almabayev, and this is a fascinating one because both guys are undefeated in their current odds range, right? Asu Almabayev favored all 3 times out, 1, 2, 3, bing, bang, boom, he won them all. And then Matheus Nicolau, on the other hand, he's only been a dog 3 times in the UFC. He's won each and every time in those outings, but every time people start to get some faith in the guy, every time he starts to get promoted up the card, it tends to go sideways. So how do you feel about this matchup, my man?
Yeah. I think that this is one of the worst pools that Asu could have gotten. And I say that after he's gotten some amazing matchmaking before this. I mean, we're talking Jose Johnson, CJ Vergara. I mean, not anything close to anything on the ground, honestly. So I think that he's gotten some really favorable matchmaking up until this point. But Nicolau does have the takedown defense, in my opinion, to stay strong here. I'll give this out. I did play early on the opener. I know Fight Odds shows the opener at plus 275, I believe. But I stared down the opener actually while lines were dropping for this full card. And this dropped at like minus 500 plus 375, which was absolutely insane. I stared at plus 275 and played plus 275 all the way through plus 200. I think the Nicolau, yes, the chin is but on the feet, Nicolau he manages distance well, in my opinion. I think that Asu is only big overhands, a leg kick every once in a while, but I think this is very basic. It's not even a lot of jabs, which I think is also problematic for his wrestling purposes. But it's a lot of big overhands and a lot of powerful stuff into his wrestling. I think that Nicolau is going to be able to see the shots coming. I don't expect for Asu to be able to just easily top time him. Nicolau's a legit black belt on the ground. He's shown it off before. I think that he's going to be able to show the urgency to get up. I know that he's at Nova União with Andre Pineda and all those guys over there. They're going to show urgency to get up. They may not show urgency to get off the cage all the time, according to Jose Aldo, but I think that he's going to show the urgency to get up. I think that he's going to be able to make this a close fight. I find it hard to believe that Asu is going to justify this price tag at a high clip. And like I said, I think that his wrestling is beautiful. He's quick. He times his shots pretty well. But this is a major step up in competition. I mean, we've seen Nicolau be in there with guys who have contended for titles in the past. And now Asu's going from Jose Johnson to Matheus Nicolau. I mean, we're talking about one of the widest gaps you could possibly have in the flyweight division. So I think this is a real prove it spot for Asu. Kudos to him if he proves that he is just the real deal and can take down whoever he wants, whenever he wants. But I really don't think that that's going to be the case here. I think that Nicolau is going to be able to fight a smart fight. I think outside of an overhand, I know some of the KO props were large for Asu. I saw plus 1,000 one time. I got to say, kudos to anybody that touched that because that's hilarious. But I can say props to anybody who touched that because Nicolau's chin is very suspect. Like I said, though, there's just not enough process for me to believe that KO is going to happen at a consistent rate. So I think the end decision, 15 minutes, we've seen Asu slow down a little bit in those third rounds. Nicolau does have some pop. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Nicolau even win a couple moments late. And overall, I think that this is just going to be a really close fight. And for me, it was an easy click upwards of plus 200. I think that this is going to be a really fun fight too. So this is a big time step up and prove it spot for Asu.
No doubt about it, right? Definitely taking a huge step up in competition. And we mentioned both these guys have been doing their job, right? If you've been betting on Asu, he's been going out there doing his job, winning the fights he's supposed to win. And I think the first fight he came out as like a pretty short favorite and absolutely steamrolled Ode Osborne. So then they were like, okay, we got to run this favorite price tag up a little bit. He's got the name, he's got the look, he's got the hat. He's got a lot of the boxes checked that people want to blindly bet into. And when you look at the Nicolau side, here's the one thing that I will say is like my hesitancy with Nicolau. I bet him against Manel Cap, and this was a while ago, right? When he won that split decision. And, dude, I felt so greasy about that bet, even when I won it, that I was just like, I don't know if I could ever bet him again. Because I was so afraid every time he would engage in that fight, like anytime he got touched by Manel Cap, who's pretty low volume, he's obviously got a ton of power, but he's low volume, right? And like he doesn't throw that much, especially at the time. He was worried about the wrestling shoes and whatever. My man's like half just fainting the whole fight. But anytime he would touch Nicolau, Nicolau's eyes would be like, just like go wide as possible. And he would look like he was in panic stations. And I just think it's gotten worse and worse over time. He's coming off 2 straight knockout losses, and he's taking a huge step down in competition, right? They're trying to say like, hey, here's your chance to get back on track. But there's a bunch of things that I look at outside of the octagon as well. And one of them that I keep track of is social media. And it's a small thing, right? Like people, you should never just go like, oh, he's got more followers, he's going to win the fight. That's not how I break fights down. But I do try and think about it like as if I was the business, right? And I'm looking at the business of Matheus Nicolau. And the business has been when we put him in a big fight, he gets knocked out in brutal fashion. And it's not to say like that's a criticism of him. It's something you can't control, right? Your durability is just out of your hands. So they put him in against Royval. What did we just see from Tyra? Another solid prospect. He weathered the storm. He dealt with that pressure, and he was able to find a way through it. And there's been other guys that have been in that same storm with Royval and not gotten knocked out. He got knocked out brutally in that fight. And it's like, okay, no problem. Let's recover. Let's rebound. Let's rally. And we've got Perez, right? Perez, a guy, who definitely has a lot of skills. But you think about a fight that I thought he could manage on the feet as long as he doesn't get hit. But then I go back and I watch Perez film before the fight. And I'm like, Perez is going to pressure. And like this guy is going to just back up and back up and back up. He's not going to want to engage because when he engages, he gets hurt. And so I'm like, he's going to do things that are bad for optics, which is run around the cage, not engaging. And then I'm like, if he wants to try and wrestle and grapple in this fight, I think he'd have a hard time. So it's like, for me, the problem is I bet him by knockout against Matt Schnell, like plus 300. That was like the one time I got back into the well. I was like, I got to do it. I'll be there no matter what at plus 320. And we'll talk about Sumudaerji later. I had Sumudaerji inside the distance against Matt Schnell. I wanted to puke in my hands about 50 times that night. But when you watch, like, a guy like Matheus Nicolau has all the skills in the world, but I just think he's one of these guys that's less than the sum of his parts. He reminds me of Misha Serkinov. If you remember, like Misha Serkinov, if you guys know from the chat, all the skills in the world. I think he's a black belt. He's got all these, he can knock you out. He's got power. He looks like $1 million. You just look at the guy. He looks physical. He looks strong. He's got muscles. If he gets hit one time, the fight's over. Every time. It's just like, that it's not sustainable, right? We can't fight like this, even if we have all these other ancillary skills. And for me, that's the problem with Nicolau. It's like, against a guy like Matt Schnell, he's even more worried about getting knocked out. Like, he wants to engage even less than you do. But it's like, in this fight, I don't know where his confidence is at coming off of 2 knockout losses. So I think you're definitely getting the upside of, hey, he's been a great underdog. He's gone out there and proved it in this odds range before. You can justify the risk 100%. But my hesitation is, I do think Asu Almabayev has shown a little bit of creativity with the striking in the UFC, spinning head kicks and these kind of things, where Jose Johnson will take that and just keep it rolling. I don't know that especially if he doesn't see it coming, that Nicolau's taking any of those shots, honestly. And like that for me is the thing where if you can show a little creativity, I'm not seeing him post a lot of highlights of, hey, let me go out there and wrestle. He's showing a lot of boxing highlights on his Instagram. I think my man understands the assignment, which is if I could go out there and be assertive on the feet, chase this guy down, he does not want to box with me. He does not want to step into the pocket. He's got good strikes, and he actually has underrated power. If you go back and look, you mentioned it, but his UFC knockdown rate is very good. The problem is he just receives knockdowns at too high of a rate, especially for flyweight, where a lot of guys are durable just by, the nature of the weight class. And this guy is getting knocked down at a really alarming rate for my liking. So for me, I think it's a really fascinating fight. It's good matchmaking. 2 guys that are both young, that both have, accrued some relevant experience. But the point I was making about social media is this. 10 fights deep in a UFC career, Matheus Nicolau can't rub together 30,000 Instagram followers. And this guy, Asu Almabayev, he's had 3 fights in the UFC. He's got 200 some odd thousand. He comes out with a cool hat on. They could easily shoot this guy up the roster. Meanwhile, it's hard to just promote a guy that has been flatlined on your television twice in the last couple months. It's like, are we going to put him in a title eliminator if he wins this one? It's tough. I'll be straight up and honest. I wanted this fight for Tyrus so bad. I wanted this fight more than the Royval fight so bad. Do you understand? He would have done bad things to Matheus Nicolau, guys. One of those punches, he could have taken 50 of them from Nicolau. One of those punches back from Tyrus, he's doing the dance. So I'm telling you, that was like my dream matchup. In some ways, I hope he wins this one so he can be matched up with Tyron next. But ultimately, I think Asu might be the guy who's coming. I think Nicolau might be the guy who's going. I think it's a fun one. Good scrap. But for me, keep my hands clean to this one because it's a big chalky favorite, but I do lean towards the Asu side here. And I'll do a little bit more research tonight. The one thing is, nobody's ever really taken Nicolau down and had success. So it's like, he's probably going to have to do some striking here, and we're going to find out more about him. But I just think that he's been working on that aspect of his game, knowing like, this is my opportunity to be a star. Go out there and knock this guy dead. And other guys have done it. Alex Perez, good fighter, guy who can strike. But he's not freaking, Clubber Lang, right? And he was out there, one connection, and this dude is like frozen against the cage. I was like, I couldn't believe it. Even watching live, I was like, oh my God, he just made Alex Perez look like Muhammad Ali. But in any case, I do think that Matheus Nicolau, better skills on paper. So that's, it for me is a fascinating fight. All right, man. Next up, we're on the main card, and I've already given my write-ups, my predictions. These are posted for channel members. These are posted on Patreon, but we will also talk about them live now on the air because those people have already had a chance to look them over. In any case, guys, we got Darren Elkins taking on Daniel Pineda. Ultimately, you got to pick a side in a closely lined matchup in terms of, making a pick, and I'm going to pick the damaged Darren Elkins. I'm not going to feel good about it, right? If you look, I've bet Cub Swanson by knockout at plus whatever it was, and he went out there and just treated it like target practice, kicking here, there, everywhere, just treating him like a punching bag. And that's not a fun look, and it's hard to watch legends, guys that have been around for a long time, get treated like that. But you look, and one guy has had a really productive UFC career. He's 18-10, I believe, in the promotion. He's gone out there and beaten a lot of solid guys over the years, and you look at the losses, most of them, you're like, fair enough. Like you're like, okay, I get it. Like that was not one that you were designed to win. And then for Daniel Pineda on the other side, his career's been a disappointment. He's a guy that was caught on the juice, and then when he was not on the juice anymore, you could see it. Right? It's like some guys that you're like, oh, I don't know, maybe he's still on it. It's like, no, he is off the juice. Like, and you look at some of the interviews and those things. I don't like to read too much into that, but I don't think that they're very bullish signs when somebody's like, yeah, I'm basically ready to retire if I lose this one, and I'm gonna go out there and give him my best. I'm like, that's gonna keep my money off of the minus 105. And so I just look and I'm like, one guy I know is willing to go through hell. Like even that Cub Swanson fight where he's being treated like a victim of a violent crime. He's like trying to convince the referee why he shouldn't have stopped it. And then in the other case, it's like Daniel Pineda has been lucky, in my opinion, to be going with a couple guys that are certainly skilled and talented in his last couple fights, but not necessarily the most potent finishers, like guys that typically win decisions in the UFC. And so I think of a guy like Darren Elkins as a guy that is built to come back on a guy like Daniel Pineda if Pineda doesn't kill him. So Pineda in round one, sure, reasonable. I get that. But beyond that, I do think he's going to have a very tough time against Elkins because Elkins pushes a very good pace. And he's been out for a year. So that's why I say it's a little bit more on the risk curve. Do I want to lay a chalk price with Elkins? No. But do I understand why people bet the plus money? I do. Because you look at a guy like Elkins, and he's a guy that's a gamer with a lot of UFC wins that pushes a heavy pace. And Daniel Pineda hates that. So I think that when you look at Pineda, he's super talented, super legit. But it's hard to choke Darren Elkins. Just look through his record. A lot of guys have tried. A lot of guys have put him in dangerous situations. He gets rolled through here, there, the other way, and then he finds a way out of it, and then they're tired, and then he's on top, and then they get beat. And I do think it's possible that it happens again here. Both guys are old. It's not like one guy's old and one guy's young. I think they're both old. And honestly, I think Darren Elkins wants to continue his career more than Pineda. Just if I measure their will, like who wants to be here more, I think it's Darren Elkins. Do I think it's advisable for his health? No. That's his choice. So the damage is back, and I think he's probably going to take a lot of damage and win this fight anyway. What do you think about this one, brother?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I am a Nathaniel Wood round 2, round 3 survivor, I can say. Yeah, I mean, just absolutely brutal. Brutal beat in that one. But Pineda, H-Town, we know that he gets a lot of work in with Josh Van and a lot of those young guys in that area. And it does show in round 1. It shows every time. His boxing looks decent. He's gonna obviously have a speed advantage here. He's gonna have more pop. In round 1, I think that he's gonna give the damage some damage. But round 2, round 3, I mean, Darren Elkins is. I mean, we're going to. He's gonna drag you into deep water, and then you're gonna go right to hell with him. Like there is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's as you mentioned, Elkins does seem like somebody. One, he's crazy enough to keep on fighting, but two, he has the genuine desire to keep fighting. While Pineda seems to be content with, all right, this was my last UFC run. I had a little bit of fun, some fun fights. I lost, is what it is. But Elkins seems like he still lives, breathes, and eats this shit. So I'm interested to see round 2, round 3, what that looks like. The thing is, Elkins, all the damage he's taken over these years, when does it end? When does he just like finally go out cold? Like when does it happen? I mean, even if we're thinking about going as far back to the Ryan Hall fight, that wasn't some just grapple fest where Ryan Hall got into some dominant positions. Ryan Hall was spin kicking him, looking like a K1 kickboxing champion on the feet. And so you're dealing with all this damage, no pun intended, but you're dealing with all this damage over the years, and it has to catch up to him one of these days, and he's just going to go out cold completely. I don't think that Pineda's the guy to do it, but I will say that Elkins is it. I can't eat minus 115 on a guy that I know is going to have to go through hell most likely just to get to his normal win condition.
Better live bet than a pre-bet.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm cool with passing on this first round, seeing what happens. We know that Pineda is going to most likely quit eventually. And he did tough it out all the way. But like you mentioned, it wasn't like he was going against the most potent finishers in the world. And so Elkins is going to push a pace. We know that he's going to wrestle, and he's comfortable. He's comfortable in hell. Pineda is not comfortable in hell. And so I do side with Elkins as a pick, but from a betting standpoint, I can't eat minus 115 pre. And so I'll look the live bet here. And anybody who's on Pineda round one or anything like that, more power to you. I think that that's also a good look if you're looking at it out of the Pineda lens.
Yeah, I think it captures a decent amount of his win equity. I know some people in the chat like Pineda decision. I do like some proof of concept, right? And he doesn't have any of that. He normally loses unanimously as well. It's not like it's typically close split decisions. It's like, pretty clear losses on the cards. But I certainly understand the merit, right? Like Darren Elkins is no prize these days. But I just think that there's some things that you can't change, right? And if you have bad cardio when you're in your prime of your athletic career, then when you're late in your athletic career and you're saying like I'm not sparring anymore, I'm just running, that sounds like a guy who's trying to make weight and not a guy who's trying to be in 15-minute fight shape. And I just think of a guy like Darren Elkins, the one thing you can know is that he's going to be on the mats, he's going to be preparing for these fights with the team alpha male guys and all those things. So he could definitely get beat, but I just look at him as like the guy I'd rather have my money on in a fight that gets really tough. And that's no disrespect to Pineda. He's a skilled guy, talented competitor. I'm sure he'd be a great coach. Probably a way better coach than Darren Elkins, with no disrespect. But you just look at Darren, he's a guy that's built for this shit, man. Nobody takes a shellacking like Darren Elkins. So let's see how it goes. In any case, my man, we can move along to the next fight. We got Jake Hadley taking on Cam Smotherman. And, like, all my analysis points towards Jake Hadley should have the advantage here, but like I will say Cam Smotherman, give me a little bit of the aura this week, right? He's coming in, makes weight, does the turnaround from Saudi Arabia, and then he's talking very confidently in the media, saying like I'm going to show everybody what I'm made of in this fight. I'm like, okay. And especially when he's such a big underdog, I'm always going to start stroking the chin when somebody actually feels like they have a chance to win and they're going to go out there and try and not just give up on themselves. Sometimes you could literally look at somebody and be like, oh, they don't even think they're going to win the fight, right? And it's like, I don't think that he's going out there, with that presupposition. But on the other hand, I don't think he's got a very good ground game. I had written in my notes before he was on Contender Series, like, this guy is allergic to being on the ground. He does not want to be there at all. And I think that Hadley, very talented on the ground, right? A guy that's shown a pretty good system of jiu-jitsu on the mat. That being said, Jake Hadley has almost been knocked out brutally in the UFC before. Like, Charles hit him very hard. He got back up and then he hit him very hard again. And he showed some good resolve there. But I just think of a guy like Hadley as pretty untested at 135. That's the one concern I would have for him. He went out there against Callan Lawford on short notice. He did his thing, D'd up most of the takedowns, had a lot of success in the boxing. But Callan Lawford isn't like a really proven UFC guy. I have high hopes for him getting back on track in the future. But it's like he's still got a lot of proving to do. He's still a guy who's very young in his career. And I think of both these guys as like Contender Series fodder, right? Like Hadley's certainly the higher tier guy, but he was higher tier at 125 and he got chased out of the weight class because he can't make the weight. So it's like he seems to me like a tweener, right? If he was doing wrestling weight classes, he'd be a 132 pounder. But this guy, unfortunately, he's got to go up to 135, and it's a little bit of, he's not the biggest guy, right? So I think he's going to be a very average size bantamweight at best. Although I did hear from the people that have trained with him that he was huge for flyweight, so God bless him, right? But I don't think he's going to be huge for bantamweight. I'll just put it that way. So for me, I don't know that he carries the same size advantage. I don't know that he carries that same bullying advantage in the striking. He does some interesting things, but again, I don't know how they're going to translate. He does a lot of the elbow blocking. It's one of the most unique styles in MMA, honestly. Like, he's like here and just like blocking everything off that lead elbow. It's a fun thing to watch, but when it doesn't work, Charles Johnson hits him with a clean right down the middle and he hits the back on the fence. So, again, when you're talking about a path to victory, I would look at the Smotherman by knockout prop. I think that's his best chance to win. I think outside of that, he's probably, going to have a tough time here, but let's see how it shakes out, man. He's stepping up on short notice for a big opportunity. All the props I saw on Hadley sucked. They were all like plus 200 and below. I was like, what are we doing here? There's literally nothing to sink my teeth into at those numbers. So, I'm curious what you think about this one, my man.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of your breakdown. Hadley, I think that he Jewish. I do think that Hadley's physical enough to get this to the ground. And even if he doesn't, I think that he'll be fine here. Cam is exciting fun personality. I enjoy him on Twitter. I've enjoyed this whole fight week and this story coming from him, coming from Saudi Arabia. It was supposed to be cornering Rafion Stotts over in PFL, and then makes the flight back, makes weight. Shout out to him. So big time balls to be able to show up and be able to do all that. But that Gregorio loss is very, very rough to say the least, especially after that Kazama fight. But Cam, his chin, his striking defense, I mean, it's been really, really bad. I mean, and this goes back not only to just, he got bonked on Dana White Contender Series, he was getting bonked on regionals and Fury FC. And so I really think, I mean, he's a fun guy. He's going to come to fight. And I think that he'll probably give us a couple exciting performances. I don't think that he's a guy that's going to be able to carve out a real UFC career, honestly. Like you mentioned, I don't rate his grappling highly at all. And I don't, especially in this fight, I don't think that he has the grappling to deal with Hadley. I think if Hadley gets the back, we're talking rounder fight pretty easily. So for those reasons, Hadley's obviously the pick. But like you mentioned, all the props were disgusting. No real value on that end. The money line, I'm not paying
the
minus.
Fuck are we doing? Plus 2XX?
Yeah. Like, come on. Like, nobody's
for
touching
everything?
that.
There's nothing that
Yeah.
they won't give you one thing? Like, at least
Yeah.
give me one thing. Like,
yeah, no, they refused to throw us a bone at all with this fight. So for me, it's a pass. I expect Hadley to get it done, whether it's a very strong decision performance or it's a finish. I expect for him to get it done. But Hadley is not a guy that I want to be laying minus 500 on in parlays or anything. So that's why it's a complete pass. On the Smotherman side, I think the KO is his really only path here. So yeah, I like the KO look if you're a Smotherman guy. But outside of that, I think that Mr. Smotherman is probably going to get smothered here. So it's a pass for me.
Yeah, I think that we largely see this one the same way. I will just say, for anybody who's superstitious, my dog just came in here looking for the pets during this fight. So, if you're looking for a sign to bet an underdog, there's your sign from the Lord above. But in any case, guys, we can move along to the next fight on the card. We got Sumudaerji taking on Charles Johnson. This is what we call the people's main event of the week. Everybody is excited about this one. I think I started us off on the last one. So, Key, why don't you start us off, my man? What do you think about the pride of St. Louis against the Tibetan Eagle? The Tibetan Eagle dying for a win right now in the UFC. My man is on hard times. And meanwhile, Charles Johnson, maybe the hottest fighter in the flyweight division right now. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, once you get the Cejudo stamp, I think you made it in life. And Cejudo puts out a video on Charles Johnson finish. I think that it's showtime now. But in all seriousness, Charles Johnson is, everybody's favorite fighter. He's all action. I love the way that this guy fights. I hate that he's just now being able to make this run. I'm glad that the UFC kept him after that string of losses because he has proven why he deserves to be here. I mean, that finish was so slick. And the performance in St. Louis versus Hadley was a real step up from what we usually saw out of him. It usually takes a long time to get going and builds into these fights. But I think that he just dealt with a lot of shit matchmaking at the beginning of his UFC career and then finally pushed through. And now he's starting to see some of the real success that I think that he deserves to have at this level. I think that he's a guy, and I really wish that we could, and it probably won't happen, but I wish he could get a 5-rounder because I think that he is a guy that just has that type of style. And for that comment, I do think that 1+ takedown is a very good bet. I think that here, Johnson, I was expecting to think, easy parlay piece. This is going to be easy. Sumudaerji is really, really legit on the feet. And I know that we a lot of times just remember that Schnell performance and him eventually dying from Schnell just somehow magically staying alive in that fight. But Sumudaerji is a sniper. I mean, he finds shots really well. His rear leg kick is to the body and to the head is nasty. But the level of competition that he's winning against, super suspect. And Liam will probably have a lot more to say on this for sure as a grappler himself. But off of his back and on bottom, this guy, we're talking Elise Reed type vibes, the male version. It seems like he just has no clue what's going on. I know that he's been putting in the work with Team Alpha Male, and I'm not sure what's up with the knees. He's been wearing the brace, and I know sometimes guys continue to wear the brace out of surgery. But I know that he was fighting the Matt Snell or one of the fights with the torn ACL. I'm not sure if he ever got surgery or how that process has worked. I'm not sure what his rehab has looked like. So I'm concerned a little bit over his normal athleticism and pop due to that also. And I think that Charles Johnson, I think it has to be pretty obvious. He's talked so much about, oh, I want a sub. He's put it on Twitter during fight weeks at times. Oh, I want the submission. I want the submission. UFC said, here it is, buddy. Like, go ahead and just go get you one right now. Because I think that the obvious path here is to grapple. And I think that Charles does have, I mean, we know that his high school history with wrestling has been and shown to be a pretty good wrestler over his career. But I think that it has to be a bunch of pace, volume, jab, jab, jab. We're talking cage pushing, again, getting into some takedowns and forcing the grappling here, doing anything to make Sue uncomfortable, because at range, this is a fight that I'm not too sure Charles Johnson is going to look minus 225 in. Like, I can tell you that much. I don't think that this is an easy walk through the park on the feet in a 15-minute kickboxing match. So due to that, I think that he has to wrestle here. I do think that he's going to wrestle. I have some slips in my dub club right now with Charles Johnson. And I think that this is a good spot for him to continue the streak that he's been on. And I'm interested to see who he gets from here. And I'm not saying this for sure that he gets it done, because Sue is a formidable opponent. But I think that the matchmaking could get pretty serious for him. And, I mean, we look at that age right there. We're getting close to that death sentence level for flyweights. So I think that if there's any time to make a real run, it's right now. And I think it's going to continue. The Pride of St. Louis, I think, has this one. But I'm not running to parlay this. I can tell you that much.
Yep. Again, we're going to see this one largely the same way, my man. And here's what's fascinating about this fight. I want to show something on screen, which is I think one of the edges that I find sometimes in grappling is I go back and I clip individual sequences, and I could point to specific examples. Armin Petrosian, before he fought Adolfo Vieira, I clipped all the times he gave his back up to somebody that couldn't do anything about it, and I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen against this guy. He's going to get choked really bad if he does that. And it's like, those are the kind of things I look to exploit. And in this case, it's actually the opposite, right? Which is, I wanted to isolate, does Charles Johnson actually have the capacity to grapple somebody? Because I was like, I think he does. Like, I believe he does. He's 4-0 career to the sub, but I have to see it. I have to, it can't just be like, I hear you say I trained it or something like this. So I went back and found specific examples. He had Azat Maxim mounted. He got an easy takedown in the third round. You could attribute that to him being fatigued. Okay, fair enough. Then you look back, and let's see if I can navigate this. Oh, God. Sorry, guys. Bear with me. I'm not technologically savvy. Here we go. Yeah, he had a fully locked-in choke. And if you guys go back and look at that, by the way, all this has been in Patreon, in the chat, for a while. But if you look back at that, the commentators then talk about the fact, they're like, I think he would have put him out. The guy, as soon as he lets go, his legs like go limp and he just starts like wrestling again. But it looked like he was on the verge of being choked unconscious. And when you look at that, like grip sequencing, it's beautiful, right? That's against a really good wrestler in Azat Maxim, a guy who's trying to reassert himself in the fight, and he put him in a really dangerous situation. Then if we continue our journey here, oh God, sorry guys, bear with me. Submission attempt from the bottom, right? Against Azat Maxim, he's going to defend that, right? He's going to D that up. Against Sumudaerji, that's probably the end of the fight. You scroll up a little bit further, that's the end of the fight. If he gets his back and he gets that choke, it's the end of the fight. So, listen, I don't know that Charles is going to wrestle. That, for me, is an open question. But I will just say, he faced resistance in that fight against Azat Maxim. He goes out there. It's a guy who's 15-0, and he's supposed to lose. That's just the truth, right? They're setting him up for failure. They're like, all right, thanks anyways. Go, appreciate the services. Go out here and do the JOB and get out. And then he goes out there, and he springs the upset, right? He's able to reverse Uno card them, right? And he goes out there and showed, not only can I go out there and compete on the feet, because, by the way, he got hurt badly in the first round and then came back out and whooped his ass, but also you look at the fact that the guy can go out there and reverse positions. He was like, you want to wrestle? Okay. And then he started wrestling him back, and then he started taking him down, and then he started putting him in bad situations, and you're like, holy shit, Charles Johnson, when he starts wrestling and grappling people, he can do well. The problem is he's fought better wrestlers and grapplers than he is throughout most of his UFC career, and it's like, those are hard guys to out-wrestle and grapple. So I'm going to keep it on the feet. I'm going to try and beat him up standing. Against Joshua Van, he could have taken another path. But here's the other thing, guys. When you're 33 years of age, they're not going to promote you if you go out there and put on stinky performances and wrestle people to close split decisions. He did that with Zhalgas Zhumagulov. It didn't take him any further in the division, right? To have a very close decision. Everybody saying, did you win it? Did you not? Instead, he goes out there and gets the knockout of the year candidate against Josh Van, and now everybody's saying Charles Johnson for president, right? It's like, you look at this guy, and he goes from being a dog several times in a row to now he's being heavily favored. And I think I went to the well twice, like bet it again at plus 123 and plus 123 against Hadley. I was like, you're giving me the pride of St. Louis and St. Louis at plus 123. Give me that and let's find out. But now it's the kind of fight where I'm like, it's price prohibitive on the favorite here, but I think he has every opportunity to finish. I talked about the fact if you think somebody's got the positioning to submit somebody, they can go for the TKO. I'll just say, guys, he's been getting way more violent. He's been getting way more aggressive. Like, his coaches every time in between rounds are on his ass. Like, you do not have the rest of your life. It's right now. Like, they're screaming at the man. And I'm like, he's going to come out here in rounds 2 and 3 if he's down a round, and he's going to try and kill this guy with everything that's in him, whether that's taking him down, whether that's doing whatever he has to, in my humble opinion. That's what I saw against Azit. He was like, yo, my back's against the wall. No more effing around. If I need to wrestle, I'm wrestling. If I need to punch him, I'm punching him. If I need to kick him in the head, I'm kicking him in the head. And he just went out there and beat his ass. And I'm like, Charles right now is the guy with the most momentum in the division, so I'm not stepping in front of that personally. Like, I just think right now, the fact that he's beating Josh Van and these guys, I was impressed by that, right? I thought that Josh Van was where the rubber was going to meet the road because I was like, this guy doesn't grapple. He's not going to go out there and push it. So then he went out there and just knocked out the top prospect in the division. Okay, I am now seeing you, sir. Respect, sir. I'm like, what do I say to this guy? 28 years of age, like, definitely we could see improvement from Sumudaerji, but what do we know about the guy? He's never beaten anybody good. He looked like shit against every good guy he's ever fought. He's gotten taken down every which way but loose. He's got good southpaw striking. That's his upside here, right? Charles has struggled with the southpaw striking. As at Maxim, southpaw punched him in the face a couple times, like hurt him bad. That's the upside here. But I think outside the KO, outside of a close split decision, I think Sue is really going to be tough sledding here. Because the other thing is, as at Maxim, guys, tried everything. He hurt him bad. He tried to track him down with strikes. Then he put him in a choke that would have finished most guys. His poise in the choke. He's just pushing off on a hip. Just calm as could be, like roll this way, that way, the other way. And I was like, man, this guy is just hard to kill. And that's a good attribute for a fighter. So you could hurt him, you could get him in some danger, and he will hurt you back. He'll keep fighting. I think that, again, price prohibitive at minus 225. He's 2-2 as a UFC favorite. But the guy was critically underrated for some of these performances as a dog where he should have been favored. And I think that now, he's getting a lot of that respect that he was owed. So you're a little late to the window on the money lines, right? But I think it's the kind of fight where there could be some prop value. And again, you see a guy that has no submission wins in the UFC, subline plus 350. I wonder what they're thinking. They're thinking, yeah, this is a much better chance to get a submission than these other fights he's had. So just something to keep in the back of our mind, guys. And honestly, the last thing I'll say here, if Matt Schnell had just beaten him on the ground, no problem, right? I bet Sumudaerji inside the distance. I'd have said, hey, that was my mistake. Dude, he had him time traveling just like Matt Schnell was time traveling, right? This guy, Sumudaerji, got tired. He got tired in a war, right? I'm not saying anything bad about it. It's like, hey, he went to war, but this guy also got tired. He was getting beat up on the feet. And then Matt Schnell is able to just go, hit, step 1, step 2, step 3, and it's over. Can't be looking like that. So for me, those are all just huge red flags. And that's the end of that. Next up, my man, we got Rob Font taking on Kyler Phillips, the Matrix. And speaking of submission angles, there's another one here, right? I don't know how much money I'll lose in a lifetime fading Rob Font by submission, but I think that there's a chance that I'll go back to the well again this time. I've bet Kyler Phillips by sub before. I've faded Kyler Phillips before with Hadley and Paiva and others. So, like, I've been back and forth on the guy, but I look at Rob Font as a guy that got very lucky that Corey Sandhagen's shoulder was injured last time because, guys, I just don't know how he didn't finish that choke. I had 90-1. 90-1. Corey Sandhagen sub 5. And this guy has him in a fully locked in Darce choke and just lets it go. I was like, okay. This game, you got to love it. And when you look back at it, I think that obviously Rob Font is tough as an old leather boot. But he's 37 years of age in a division that's not very forgiving. And you got a guy in Kyler Phillips who is averaging a lot of takedowns, who has a pretty high submission attempt rate, and he's probably going to dice through Rob Font like butter athletically in the first round. So it's like, if that's the case, I think there's a chance he could hurt him and finish him, like just follow him to the ground and get the sub. And a lot of these guys, what do? They hurt Rob Font 750 times, and they try and beat him up. The guy is invincible. Okay, fair enough. You put somebody in a choke, they go to sleep like anybody else. It just doesn't matter, right? And when you have somebody hurt, it's a lot easier to do it. So for me, I think Kyler Phillips has a couple chances to finish this fight, and I think that the primary one is hurt this guy or take him down and put him through the submission paces. You're a better grappler than he is, and he can't make up that gap in the amount of time he's had. So I think that when you look at Rob Font and the bullish case for him, you say, hey, it's a guy at 37 who had the wherewithal and the smarts to say, I'm getting out of New England Cartel for a camp. I'm going over to TriStar. I'm trying something different. I'm working with the Zahabi brothers, trying to work on my jiu-jitsu, get something else going. He doesn't have bad skills. He's got a good boxing game. He's got a great jab. He sticks people with it. Great knockdown rate throughout his UFC career. But what has happened recently? You always have to look and say, okay, yeah, he's had a great career. What about recently? 5 fights. Of his last 5 fights, 2 of them, so you look back 5 fights ago, 2 fights, he suffered 5 knockdowns in those fights. And then what's happened since? He's been out-wrestled by everybody who wanted to, just taking him down every which way but loose, controlled him the whole fight. It's like, that's not great, right? It's like on the feet, you were getting knocked down all over the place, and on the ground, even in fights that he's winning on the strike count, right? So he's up on the strike count, I'm landing more than you hit me, and I fall all over the place. It's like, that's a tough way to win. On top of that, the guy's getting taken down all over the place by the guys who want to do that. So it's like, do I think that Kyler Phillips, with his cardio and some of the concerns that I have on that side, is somebody I feel like minus 500, just like all chips in? It's like, no, because I've seen it before. Hadley and Paiva guys would get absolutely boinked by Rob Font. I have no doubt about that. But when you look at where Rob Font is at, unless he got the Ayman Zahabi goat rub, I think he's just going to be a little bit in over his head here, man. I think Kyler Phillips is a little too fast. And here's the difference for me between this and the last fight. You look at the last fight, Pedro Munoz has a chin from south of Hades. By the way, he submitted Rob Font back in the day after hurting him badly to the body. And then you look back, Pedro Munoz jiu-jitsu is sensational. You're just not going to out-grapple the guy. So it's like Kyler had to have a very smart, savvy fight there, manage pace and distance, and just outpoint the guy. That's what you have to do to beat him. Aldo or whoever, right? And then it's like, that's not what you have to do to beat Rob Font. You could beat his ass. Some guys that beat his ass real bad. Cheeto beat him like he stole something. So I'm just like, if you could do that and Cheeto could just dominate him all over on the mat as well, I thought Cheeto could have submitted him if he wanted to when they fought, right? And he didn't because he's a violent man. I think that in this fight, Kyler Phillips is probably going to submit him. So that's the way I see it going down, my man. What about you?
Yeah, I'm on Kyler here. I got in it was a little over a week ago on DraftKings and Bet Online, minus 225, minus 250. I'm super happy with those lines, obviously, now, saying these close to minus 500 or more. I think that this is a Kyler spot through and through. A career trajectory, as Liam mentioned earlier. I mean, you're talking 1-4 in his last 5, and the one that he's winning is against Hernandez. And while I know that win hasn't aged great, but what I didn't like out of that fight, I mean, one punch, you're talking Rob's face is blowing up now. The scar tissue is adding up more and more. And I know that we talk about the Diaz brothers all the time in terms of scar tissue and constantly open up with cuts. But whenever you're talking fractured or orbital bones and shit, your face is never the same, man. We talk about chins all the time, but your face is never the same once you start breaking a shit ton of stuff in your face. I think that this is a spot here. Kyler showed off the whole tool bag. Yeah, I mean, that's brutal stuff, dog. That's brutal stuff. I mean, yeah.
That's Joanna and Jacek alien territory.
Yeah, like it looks like he caught up to Mike Tyson in the back alley. Like that is just nasty work. But Kyler showed off his whole tool bag against Pedro Munoz. I think that was a just 10 out of 10 performance. Like I can't put it any other way. Jab was money. Check hook was money. Kicks were money. Like it was just a beautiful, complete performance. And for 3 rounds, a full 3 rounds, he gave work, full 3 rounds. And I love that. To see the cardio getting better, I think that we're going to continue to see him take steps up. And I'm not saying that Kyler is a future title contender or anything like that. Even though he definitely has the talent. I mean, talent for talent in this division, he is as talented as they come. And it's super crazy that they have all of that in MMA Lab. I mean, we're talking Marcus McGee, Mario Bautista, Kyler Phillips. Like, that's a murderer's row, like a bantamweights there. But Kyler, the jiu-jitsu here, I mean, if one arm Corey Sandhagen is giving you free wrestling classes, I'm afraid what Kyler's going to do if he gets your back or gets on top here. I think that Kyler's going to be able to grapple here. I think that on the feet, even, he's going to look good. He's going to be able to win moments. I think that his kicks and distance management, he has a weird and awkward rhythm. Like, I think that some guys just can't get a beat on it. Even Pedro, you saw, like, he wasn't even able to throw his regular leg kicks as normal like he did against somebody like Sean O'Malley because the rhythm was just so off and he's bouncing and so flowing. And so I think that Kyler is just, he's a guy that is a matchup nightmare for Rob Font, especially getting 37 years old. I think that Rob's going to have a hard time tracking him down. I think that if he does track him down, I think that Kyler's going to be able to grapple. So I think that Kyler has him covered everywhere. I'm surprised to see the price get up to as crazy as it gone because I thought that some people would just hold on to their Rob Font fandom. But everybody seems to know that this is a passing of the torch. And I think the Rob Font time is close to done. And so this is Kyler's definitely going to get it done here. And so I'm super excited for this co-main, but I think that we have an even better main event and one of the best main events that we've seen in the Apex in some time.
Hell yeah, man. I'm excited to talk about it, and we'll absolutely have you start us off for the main event. I just wanted to show, guys, I put this up on the community tab. This is free for anybody to go check out if you want. It's called the Social Media A-Side Report. I make one of these each and every week, and the only upside I could really give to Rob Font here is, number one, he's a veteran-savvy guy. He's fought a high level of competition, and he is the Social Media A-Side coming into this fight. What do I mean by that? 60,000 followers. Kyler Phillips, virtually anonymous, right? He's like one of the best fighters nobody's ever heard of. But when you look at it, that's just the truth. And I think that the way that this matchmaking looks to me is that they're trying to say, hey, here's a recognizable name that you respect in Rob Font. Watch him get smashed by our fresh new toy. But it doesn't always work out the way they intend, right? So they put you in, and Adrian Yanez, a guy that they like, a guy I think that they tried to set up for big opportunities, it didn't work out, right? He went out there, he swung it out with Rob Font. Rob Font still got power. He put him down. Hey, there's his upside right there. But you look at that fight, that was like the upside I feel for Rob Font lately, which is a competitive fight where he's got to go through the fire, and then he winged one off him and he got the win. But I just don't see him having a clear path to beating somebody like Kyler unless Kyler self-immolates, right? Like goes out there, pushes too hard early and gasses. I think that would be the only way he gets blown out of the water here. So I think the upside for Rob is just blind volume. Go out there and say, like, maybe I got new supplements. I'm committing 100% to just throwing the jab until I fall over or I win the fight. If he does that, hey, he'll give himself a chance. But I just think Kyler, too much movement, a little bit too much speed and dynamism, better footwork. I think that's going to pay dividends here. Ultimately, that's what we've got. And I'm going to close out on the A-side report in just a second. But holy shit, does Elise have them all beat combined? Not quite. Michel Demolidor Pereira, who we're about to talk about in the main event, is the house leader. But if you look, she's right at the top of the list. If you scroll down, I actually have who are the A-side underdogs, meaning people that have more followers that are the underdog. It doesn't mean you should go blindly bet them, but it does mean that it's at least something I've identified, and I do keep track of it over the course of the year. And then on the rank order, Elise Ardelean, second place, right? She's right behind. Asu Almabayev, another one towards the top. Jocelyn Edwards, a quiet 266,000. I think people would be surprised by that. Robelis Despaigne, only a handful of UFC fights, 94,000 for him as well. So I always just like to know, who are people keeping track of? And keeping this in mind, guys, Brad Katona, 2 stints on The Ultimate Fighter. They've tried to build reality shows around this guy. He can't crack 40,000. I feel bad for the guy, honestly. That's all I can say. But in any case, guys, we're about to talk about the main event. And if you're fired up like I am, then go ahead and drop a like on the video. I appreciate if you do. Shout out to our guest, guys. Key has been dropping knowledge. He's been dropping great picks. He's been getting closing line value across the board as well, which we always commend as a great measure of success. So when you look at his work speaks for itself. He's got a lot of great information. It's down in the description below. You can find him on Twitter there as well. But I just wanted to say a special thank you to our guest, and we're going to have him start us off on the main event of the evening, 31-11. Michel Demolidor Pereira taking his step up to the main event against Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. I can't think of somebody better built for 5-round fights in terms of their archetype of fighter, but he's got to survive 2 rounds here, and he's got a killer in front of him. Hell of a fight, hell of a matchmaking situation. What do you think, my man?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start it off like this. If I'm Anthony Hernandez's manager and I see Michel Pereira come across the table, the conditions of the fight, what am I asking for? I'm asking for small octagon and 5 rounds. And I think that's what was needed here, and that's what he got. I will say, round 1, round 2, Pereira could probably nuke Mike Tyson if given the chance. That's what it feels like at this point. But Hernandez knows what he is. He's not shy about it. He understands that wrestling will always be his path in damn near every fight. I'm sure that you're going to talk about the Adolfo Vieira sub because that is just an all-time moment in MMA, it feels like. But this guy's going to wrestle. I'm interested to see. Michel Pereira has a lot of questions here. At 185, we haven't seen his cardio tested. He's gotten everybody out of there super quick. I am impressed by getting Mikhail Ojacek out of there super fast as somebody he's constantly a downhill fighter and gives a lot of guys problems. But he got him out of there super fast. But the issue that I have with Pereira in a 5-round fight is the fact that it's not even that I think, his cardio is still going to be trash, because I think that his cardio is going to probably look better. 185, not as crazy of a cut. He's not killing himself just to get down some weight. And I think that he's going to be able to maintain pace a little bit better. But his decision-making skills, still absolutely awful. You would think after a Nico Price fight of the backflip and catch him on the head, you would think that, light goes off in your head. Maybe I should stop backflipping on people's heads and potentially risking fouls. No. Hurts Eor Pateria wants to do a
backflip. It's his signature move. He can't stop it now, dude.
I mean, I get it. I mean, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, they say. And so, but he just refuses to stop. And I respect the hustle to some degree, but it does not give me confidence that you're going to go 5 rounds and keep good pace. I will say the last time that he was in the small octagon and went a full fight was against a washed Ponzinibbio. And that was fight of the night. Ponzinibbio dragged him into deep waters, and Michel fought back really well. But there's some people that will argue that Ponzi had a real argument to win that fight. And so you're talking about somebody in Hernandez that is going to push a pace. He's going to get nasty in the clinch. We're going to see elbows. We're going to see knees. And it's about weathering the storm in the first 2 rounds. Now, and I said this on the BTL broadcast, pre-bet wise, I think that the Pereira side is kind of the only way pre-bet from a money line perspective. Just because we talk about value, especially on this pod too. We talk about value. I'm not looking to eat minus 135 to clench my butt cheeks together for 10 minutes, praying you get outside of that 10 minutes just to get to your win condition. Because Anthony Hernandez's win condition here is rounds 3, 4, and 5, melting him as the fight goes on, wearing on him, making this ugly, making it nasty, and consistent wrestling. That doesn't just magically happen as soon as the bell rings off in round 1. And so I do think that the body kicks will be problematic for Hernandez early on. I think that we're going to see some flying knees, probably some shit off the cage, maybe a backflip or 2, depending on if Hernandez goes down on bottom. And so I think that you're going to see a really wide range of attack in these first 10 minutes. But after the first 10 minutes, I line Hernandez a pretty wide favorite in rounds 3 through 5, if I'm being completely honest. I really do. I know that the decision, the round 1 money line on Pereira on DraftKings right now, I know that it was like minus 135 or something. I think that that's a completely great way to play this on the Pereira side. And I also think this money line isn't a bad option because I do give him a shit ton of fame. I mean, you can't deny it. The guy is absolutely all action, and he's a great finisher. And at 185, it seems like he's truly found the right weight class to keep him busy, to keep his strength and conditioning correct. And so I think that we're going to continue to see a better version of him. But we also have not, I know that the takedown defense at 94% looks super nice and shiny, but he hasn't seen anybody close to Hernandez's wrestling and the amount of wrestling that he's going to have to deal with. Can you stay calm in consistent wrestling scenarios for 25 minutes, knowing in the back of your mind, I'm somebody who's gassed out to Tristan Connolly before. I'm somebody who's gassed out to much less. And so you're talking about 25 minutes of staying calm, keeping range. Yeah, he's got to be blasting body kicks. But what comes with body kicks comes with potential grappling scenarios. Caught kicks lead to wrestling scenarios. And so I think that you're going to reach some problems. I think that a teep kick will also be a good weapon to use. But this is an interesting fight because whoever wins here, I can already see it now on Twitter. If Michel nukes him round 1 or round 2, never a doubt. Why did y'all ever bet Hernandez? And if Hernandez melts him late in round 3, 4, 5, it's going to be Fluffy's the GOAT. Fluffy's the best of all time. Michel Pereira never had a chance. So hindsight favorite will look great whichever way this fight goes. I personally slightly lean to the Hernandez side because I do think that all of the conditions in this fight, 5 rounds, small cage, he's going to be able to cage push. He's going to be able to wrestle probably. I think that points to him. But Michel in round 1, round 2 against anybody in this weight class is absolute hell. So I'm siding with Hernandez as a pick, and I slightly lean his way, but I don't advise betting him at -135 pre. And I think that the books probably will be hip to the live bet spot, but I think we're going to get a better number in live betting because I do think that Michel probably wins round 1 at a high clip, and round 2 is where we start seeing the fight to either swing or Michel keeps that pace. And then rounds 3 through 5, I think that we all here can agree that Hernandez is the favorite side. So this is a great, great fight. It's been a long time since we got an Apex main event that is just this good. And I'm so glad that, because I think that this was originally on UFC Noche. So I'm so glad that they moved that off and gave these guys 5 rounds, because these are 2 guys that, I mean, you're talking 2 or 3 fights away, and we're talking about real title contenders. So I'm super excited for this fight. I'm excited to hear what Liam has to say about his boy Fluffy.
You know, I think that this is like you mentioned, one of the most fascinating fights that we've seen in the Apex in a long time. I got to be honest, I've never been a Michel Pereira fan because he pissed me off with the fouls. Like, you know, it sounds silly, but like I've been on the wrong side of some of those tickets where he literally just does a spinning backflip to Nico Price's head. And Nico Price fought him close. Like that was like one of his actual closer fights in the UFC. But the guy was emaciating himself to make it to 170 pounds, right? If you look back, the reason he gassed so bad against Tristan Connolly is he fought like a bonehead. Like you said, the decision-making not always optimal. But he fought like a bonehead, and he cut way too much weight, and he was fighting a guy who didn't cut any weight. So that guy was fine in rounds 2 and 3 because he didn't try and kill him, and he didn't try and do backflips and all these jumps and all this crazy shit. And so Pereira just shot himself in the foot in that loss. Against Diego Sanchez, he was absolutely whooping his ass and then got disqualified. And, you know, with all due respect to Diego, like if that was earlier in his career, he never would have done that, right? We all just would agree on that. It was just the way it went. It was a foul. No 2 ways about it. Like it was adjudicated properly, but was it like within the bro code, the fighters code? Like not really. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like most of the time people just continue there. Anthony Smith is like, I could have had a world title, dog. But in any case, you look at a guy like Michel Demolidor Pereira. He's 9-2 in the UFC. So then you say, okay, those are the 2 losses. Like the ones where he shot himself in the foot, the ones where he didn't even give himself a chance to win, he blew it. He could be 11-0 in the promotion, right? He goes out there, and the wins that he has, like he's gone out there and done it a variety of different ways, right? He's shown a little bit of power on the feet, but when he can't knock you out, he can go out there and outpoint you for, you know, the 15 minutes, right? Chaos Williams, a guy I respect. I don't think he's like the highest level guy in the world, but he's confident. He's got knockout power. And before that fight, I would have told you, I think, you know, he could win that fight, and he just got shut out of the fight, right? Michel Pereira kind of showed a little bit of levels there. And the other thing is, you start looking through the guy's record, and you're like, man, people are not out wrestling and out grappling him. How much of that is because he's at 170? I think that's a question mark, right? But then you also have to say to yourself, okay, guys can't get close to him, right? Like, that's why he's winning these decisions as well. Like, guys would probably rather have a hold of him. Tristan Connolly got a hold of him because he was so tired. But, like, more often than not, this guy is just, like, keeping guys far away, keeping them honest. And he's, like, Whether it's kissing the hand and slapping you across the face or going with the kicks to the body, he just keeps a very loose and flowing approach on the feet that makes guys pretty weary about coming in. The other thing is, you look at the way these two guys are built. It's completely different, right? Like they look like they're different species of human being. And I say that as somebody who I'm a massive Hernandez fan because he's a normal human being, right? He's a weed smoking Californian, real American that goes out there and just puts people through the paces until they quit. It's a gangster approach. I say his slogan should be make grappling gangster again. That is what he does. But when you look at this guy, Michel Demolidor Pereira, he's a killer in the early going. And like at 185, he's not cutting the same weight. And so far, what have we seen from him? Nobody's made it a frame. Not a frame. They can't get through one round with this guy. And it's like, why? Because he's putting people to sleep. Like, what's his name? Tapped and went to sleep. Ihor Potieria tapped and then fell over. Like, my man was in all sorts of trouble. Then you look at and I thought he was going to be competitive there, by the way. And again, woe is me. I was wrong about that. But I just look at it and I say, okay, at 185, this guy is way more confident. He's extremely aggressive, and he's been taking guys out. When they try and get close to him, he's hurting them badly. And then if they want to dip their head in, shoot a takedown, try and wrestle, he puts their head in a vice grip, and there's nothing supremely technical about his guillotine. It's get over here, and I squeeze my big biceps together, and you go to sleep. And it's like, it doesn't take much more than that, truthfully. If you go back and look, the one thing that I love, but I also hate about Fluffy is that he's going to wrestle. And one thing I say is if somebody knows what you're going to do, it makes it a little bit easier to game plan for you, to prep for you, right? This guy is going to wrestle. And the one thing about that is Edmund Shabazian, I don't rate him. You look at his performances, every meaningful fight he's ever had since he head kicked Brad Tavares, he's lost. But if you look at that guy, he had a dead to rights guillotine on Fluffy. And Fluffy had to go whooing and like flat back himself from the feet because it was really, really tight. And Edmund is strong, right? Physical athlete, just lifted it up. Edmund stinks, with all due respect, in terms of like his process-based grappling. I faded it several times to great success in the UFC. But this guy, Michel Demolidor Pereira, I think he's athletic enough to do some crazy things. I think that he's got the ability to like scramble back up to his feet a few times in the early going based on pure, nothing technical, right? The Derek Lewis approach. Yeah! Right? Just now we're back up on our feet. Like that is what I see from this guy. Now Fluffy, if he has extended moments, like my write-up is simple here. I do think it's as simple as like Pereira in the early going is the favorite, like as far as I see it, because I don't think Fluffy's going to get easy takedowns. I do think we've seen other guys that are lesser athletes than Michel Pereira give him problems from distance, hurt him badly. Marcus Maluco Perez put him through the paces. That was a long time ago, but you have to look at it and say, did that age great? No, he got hurt badly, and then he got submitted by a guy who's no longer with the promotion. Okay, we'll forgive it and say, young in his career, have other guys gotten submission attempts off on him? Yeah, you go look at it. It's not just one guy. It's not just Edmund. I think Josh Fremd had a submission attempt. And by the way, Josh Fremd didn't get finished there. Like, you go look at some of these other performances from Fremd and you're like, man, Fluffy should be able to put that kind of guy away, you would think. Like, just based on what we know about him. And so you look at Marc-Andre Barrios and these kind of names, I'm like, yeah, these are definitely wins that are, like, nice, good wins. But I'm like, are they telling me that you could beat the top guys in the division? I don't know that. The thing about Pereira that I think has been lost is that he was one fight away from a title shot at 170. Like, he was winning all these fights. He's about to fight Wonderboy Thompson, which is like everybody's ticket to the big fight, if not the title fight. And then he misses weight. Big fuck up. Like, we can all acknowledge. But then it's Wonderboy who got the shaft, right? If you just look at how they've been booked since, who got blamed for that outcome? It was Wonderboy 100%. So you're like, okay, this guy, Michel Pereira, has then been set up for success. 3, like, cupcake matchups, if you want to call them that, where at least he's favored, at least he's expected to go win, and then he delivers Petroski instantly, and now we've seen, okay, maybe that didn't age great, but, like, Petroski's still winning all his other fights, and out-wrestling people, out-grappling people. He couldn't get close to this guy. He didn't want to, and he was afraid to get hit. I'm like, if you look at Fluffy, in some of these fights, like, he's getting hit and he's showing a good poker face and, like, dealing with it, but he's getting hurt. Like, he's getting hurt by Kopylov. He's getting hurt by these guys that are, you know, also sus in their wrestling and grappling. Like, if you just look at Kopylov and the fact that he got submitted by, what's his name? I'm now drawing a blank on the guy. Carl Roberson. Really bad sign, right? Like, long-term, circle that as a red flag. Like, that's not good. And he can out-grapple guys that can't grapple, like Cesar Almeida, but he's not out-grappling good guys. And so Fluffy was able to get him down, get on top, get his game going. God bless him for it. It worked out. But in that fight, he was badly hurt, and I was like, this is probably more dangerous. Because, like, that guy, Roman Kopylov, is not submitting Fluffy. I think Michel Pereira has a chance to submit him, and I think people are, like, writing it off. He's coming off 2 straight submissions where instantly he's hurting you, and then as soon as you're hurt, I grab a hold of you, and that's it. And that's a smarter way to approach it than trying to bang these guys out on the feet. How many referees do we need to see watch somebody get beat into unconsciousness, wake back up, and get back up to their feet, not stop the fight, until you just grab a hold of their neck and choke them unconscious? It's very simple. It's straightforward. And I think you look at Fluffy Hernandez, he gets a lot of credit for the great jiu-jitsu. He deserves it. If he gets put in a choke where this guy's got 2 arms behind his neck, he's going to go to sleep like anybody else would, right? Like, and you look at the fact that he got put in that submission by Marcus Maluco Perez, and I'm like, he's a human being, guys. Like, it's a human reaction. He gets put in that choke by, what's his name? Edmund Shabazian, and he's got to make a really drastic decision to flat back himself against a big, strong guy because he's in a choke that would have finished the fight. And I think that this guy has shown, I'm willing to pursue it, whether it's with that guillotine choke on the feet, snatch it up, or whether it's with that grip from behind. So I say all this to say, if you like the Fluffy submission angle, it's like plus 195 best available. The ends by sub, it's like plus 145 best available. I would want more. I would rather take less ROI and more upside on the fact that this guy could finish you any which way but loose in the first 2 rounds. Michel Pereira, mark my words. Like, this guy can finish somebody however he wants for 2 rounds. But after that, it gets a lot more dicey. He's got 3 submissions already in the UFC, 2 of them consecutively at 185 pounds. I don't think that's anything to sneeze at. And by the way, he's on an 8-fight win streak. 3 submissions in that 8-fight win streak. It's like, the guy has shown he can grapple. Fluffy's the better process grappler. But again, when we're talking about you get hurt, you lose the purple belt, the brown belt, the everything else belt. You're trying to hold on for dear life. And I think that Fluffy has shown enough times that he gets hurt and he grapples instinctively. That's what you're supposed to do. But it's also going to mean that Michel's probably going to be throwing them sideways elbows, trying to choke this guy silly. And, like, those are dangerous spots to be in early. So I think you're right. Live bet, way better than a pre-bet on the Fluffy side for me. And I'm the biggest Fluffy fan. I steal all his shit. I love his game. But I do think that at least in round 1, he's probably going to have to be very tentative and very safe. If he's able to get his wrestling going in the first round, all I'll do is tip my cap to him and say I was dead wrong. But I just don't see it when I see these 2 guys squaring up to each other. Like, I see one guy who's a freak athlete, and I see one guy who looks like a guy that needs to get you tired to get his game going. And that, when you're tired, you're fucked. But until then, I don't think that he's as effective with his game, even though it's really high level. We've kind of seen a lot of guys put him in bad positions and bad situations, but they can't capitalize. And I just worry that Michel better at capitalizing when he gets those kind of situations. So for me, that's the danger here. I think rounds 1 and 2 on Pereira, I'll kind of leave a couple of those to myself because I haven't bet them yet. But you guys can put together the context clues there. I definitely see some potential value on a couple different props there. And likewise, if you like the Fluffy side, I think 2, 3, 4, 5 decision, all are things that could represent value because that's the way that he needs this fight to go, in my opinion. Get it to go long, extend this guy. Let's not make it about who's better athlete. Let's not make it about who's got better skills. Let's make it about who wants to be here when we're both exhausted. That's a fight that he wins, I think, 8 out of 10 times. You got to get there. You got to survive. And I do think that Michel Pereira is like one of the least respected, like 9-2 guys in the history of the UFC, right? Like, very good record on paper. And the guy's been favored virtually every time out. So odds makers respect him. He was a dog when he came in against Danny Roberts. Somebody was giving me grief on Twitter before for telling that factoid. Do you want me to give a different data point? Like, the guy hasn't been an underdog since. What do you want from me? So, like, the guy goes out there, he's favored to win every fight. Now he's a dog again. Like, I don't know. Like, maybe that means that this is the time it's going to crash down. But I just feel he's been a guy that's been pretty bankable at the window. And Fluffy deserves a lot of respect and a lot of credit. But for me, he's going to go through 2 rounds of hell in all likelihood here to get this win. And I'm rooting for him. But rooting for and betting on different things for me. So It's been a great show. It's been a great conversation. God bless you all. I hope that you guys have had a great time in the chat. If you have questions, comments, concerns, fire those off in the comment section down below. I'll try and get to as many as possible. We'll have timestamps and everything for you guys on the replay. Key, tell the people where they could find you and all the great work that you got going on, my man.
Yes, sir. First things first, I appreciate you getting me on here. It's been a long time coming. I know we had you on BTL broadcast. It's a pleasure being able to be a part of one of the best streams in the community, one of the best chats in the community. Y'all were super interactive this whole time. At this late at night, especially. I really appreciate it. I just dropped a little special free week trial in the YouTube chat just now, specifically for this chat. I really appreciate everything y'all have going on over here. In the Dub Club, you can get prize picks, underdog fantasy, better app, book bets, DFS cores, live bets. We have it all in the Discord and Dub Club, ran strictly by me. We have a couple other plus EV bettors on other sports all over. And so it's a good group of guys in there, community exclusive chat. We kick the shit. We talk a lot of shit in there, have a lot of fun. So please hit that link in the chat. Come and join. Free week trial. Come and have some fun with your boy. I'm up over 74 units this year. We're going to keep on cooking. Hopefully hit that 100 unit mark. Like I said, so many different apps, so many different platforms. I'm sure that there's at least something in the Discord that can benefit you. So I really, again, appreciate Liam for letting me on. Appreciate y'all having me. It's been a good one. We for sure got to do this again sometime soon.
Hell yeah, my man. It would be a pleasure to have you back anytime. If you don't mind, I wanted to shout out our guy Dixon. He begged in the chat and he said it several times. So I got to say thank you, Dixon. If you have a long shot prop, he's looking for basically us to put together a parlay of sorts. So if you have any kind of long shot prop that you feel comfortable with, it doesn't matter if it hits or not, just anything that you think has value, because that's all we're looking for ultimately.
Okay, we were talking about Matsumoto. We've been talking about that Gilly, so I'll go with Matsumoto sub. Fuck it.
Hey, okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get the parlay button going on best fight odds, and we're going to take... We got to make it a sub special. You know that. If we're rolling out a sub to start, then I got to find another sub for us. So let's say this. Let's go Kyler Phillips by sub.
I like it.
Oh, no. It's gotten crushed on the book. I was going to bet it. Fuck. All right, then let's look here. Excuse my language, everybody. Let's go Charles Johnson by sub plus 350. The chalkier lay. So we got Matsumoto, the long shot at plus 850. We got the chalkier lay on Johnson sub plus 350. Overall, that's going to net you out of plus 41.75. So a long shot prop for our guy Dixon. There'll be plenty more in terms of my long shot prop ideas before fight time tomorrow, but wanted to get you something, Dixon. So appreciate the support, appreciate the questions, the comments, and concern in the chat. Thank you for asking. And ultimately, guys, thank you to the people who have contributed. We had 2 people, I believe, donate today. Nate Brown with the dono and says hit the like button. What a kind contribution. Thank you so much. And also, who wins with baby oil, though? We didn't even give that the time of day, but we have to say thank you very much for the $2, Christopher. I don't know what you're asking, really, but God bless you for it. Thank you for the dono. And it's your right to say what you will. So there you have it. Ultimately, guys, hope you had a blast like I did. We'll be back talking fights each and every week on this channel. So if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, drop a like. It goes a long way. And come back next time. We're having all the same fun again. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.